Billy Carson, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, man, for coming here.
Hey, thank you.
You are one of the most fascinating people to follow on Instagram. Wow. Your videos, all the things that you look into and talk about are just so, I mean, out there. A lot of it's really out there for me, but it's just so fascinating, and I've often fallen down many rabbit holes watching your videos and following your content.
Thank you, man.
How did you get into all this stuff?
You know, it's a real amazing story. We were living in New York. I was born in Queens, New York.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, Queens General Hospital, 1971. And my parents, you know, were having some issues there. My father was having some issues with drugs and alcohol. And they decided, you know, they had a great idea. Let's move to Miami. So
a lot of people from Queens end up down there.
Yeah, so they went to the cocaine cowboy capital. And we get in Miami, and we're living in the hood, in the ghetto, in Opelika.
Oh shit!
Yeah, hardcore back then too. Like, we lived in the Bermuda Triangle part of Opelika, which was the steel gate that they put around the city to keep the crime on the inside. And as you know, there's Opelika Airport nearby. It was in the movie with Martin Lawrence and Will Smith, Bad Boys. One of the Bad Boys. I think it was Bad Boys 2 or something. They used that airport in the movie. But anyway, I would go outside, because back then, 70s, right? 1977. There's no cable TV. There's no cell phones, no screens to look at, no tablets or anything. You go outside and you play. I'm outside looking at the airplanes go over, just observing how long it took for them to go from horizon to horizon. Like, you know, that was like the exciting thing of the day back then, because we couldn't go and play out in the neighborhood because it was so much crime and killing going on. We could only either play in the backyard or in the front yard, and we couldn't leave the gate parameter left or right. If we passed that, we get in trouble. So I'm out there watching, and I see this object go across, and I'm like, it cleared the horizon in seconds, not minutes. It literally just, and I know I saw it. I'm like, I know I just saw something, but it was more of an oval, almost like an egg. It didn't have wings, a cockpit, didn't have a tail fin, didn't have anything that looked like a plane. And I'm just looking. I'm searching, I'm scanning the sky for this thing, and it comes back. But this time when it comes back, it's lower. It's about, maybe now I can estimate, about 200 meters above my head, and it's completely silent, and it stops. It comes to an immediate stop, and then it just stays there for like 3 or 4 seconds, and it just takes off the way that it came in. And I was blown away. I was like, what did I just see? Now, back then, the word UFO didn't exist for me. Flying saucer didn't exist. Aliens didn't even exist in my vocabulary yet. All I knew was I saw something that wasn't an airplane. So the next day I went to my school, Rainbow Park Elementary. We lived four or five houses away from the school. I go to the school. I tell my teacher, my dad wants me to do a report, because my dad always made me do book reports. I said, I need to go get some encyclopedias from the library because I'm researching something. She sent me to the library. I get the Encyclopedia Britannica on aerospace. I'm looking at swept wing, delta wing, ballistic, intercontinental ballistic. I'm looking at all these different types of projects that we had for planes between United States, Russia, submarine missiles that were sent from the ocean. I'm trying to find whatever I could see, and I saw nothing close to what I saw in my backyard. And that started me down this entire rabbit hole of research and investigation. I started with aerospace first.
No way. So that's what sparked this whole thing.
Sparked
How old were you?
7 years old. I had just turned 7.
You know what's crazy too is there's a lot of reports of UFO sightings near schools.
Yeah.
I think there's the most of them are near schools. And I'm sure you're familiar with the Zimbabwe, or was it? No, where was that? There was an Africa.
It was in South Africa. There's one in Russia by a school.
Yeah.
You're right. There's by schools a lot.
There's one famous one I was just talking to a guy about that happened in Africa. I'm forgetting the name of the actual name of the school, but there was a actual like whole report of beings coming out of the craft and like telepathically communicating with the kids.
Yeah, in broad daylight.
In broad daylight, yeah.
I remember that.
There's many accounts of UFO sightings near schools.
Yeah.
You said you were 7 years old?
Yeah.
8 years old?
7, yeah.
7. Wow.
Crazy.
So what was life like growing up down there?
I was pretty tough. I mean, I can remember seeing the yellow chalk, you know, in the streets, you know, people getting shot, killed, stabbed, coming home, and the cops would be all around because somebody stabbed somebody. A neighbor would rob another neighbor. I mean, it was wild.
What does that do to a 7-year-old growing up? Like, what is that? How does that affect you as you're maturing
right.
and entering your teenage years and all that?
That's pretty tough. You know, I saw how it really, for me, my brain was able to process things a little differently. I always thought I have to get out of here. I need to escape. My brother, on the other hand, for example, who was only 1 year younger than me, born in the same month, just a few days later, you know, he ended up going down the other fork in the road, life of crime. Ended up doing 10 years in prison for attempted murder and armed robbery and stuff like that. My sister, I saw how it affected her. She ended up, was headed towards the Olympics, was a great runner, ended up, you know, getting pregnant at a very early age and then moving out like I did at 16 and just kind of lost that. But she still became very successful later on, fortunately. But I just saw how it rocked us. It created a dysfunctional family situation, and it really messed us up mentally. For whatever reason, for me, I never let it affect my school studies. I was very studious. I was always looking and digging for more information and more knowledge. Studying and researching and reading books was my escape to another dimension, pretty much, you know.
Oh, really?
That's how I escaped. I remember the encyclopedia salesman came to the door, and, you know, he used to go door to door back then, and offered my mom an entire set, like no credit, no nothing, and she just paid $30 a month. She didn't have the money, but she took the set. The guy came back one time, never came back again. So I had this whole set of Encyclopedia Britannicas. I had biology, psychology, physics, economics. I mean, that was for me. That was like my escape. And I knew that one day I would get out of that neighborhood because I realized one thing. I had sold some toys that I had, some broken toys. I went door to door asking for donations because I had no money for the ice cream truck. Everybody was going to, I just wanted bubble gum. I couldn't get bubble gum. We couldn't even afford bubble gum. We were eating Cairo syrup and toast. Wow. And, you know, if we get some donations or some things from some neighbors, we'd have some food to eat. It was pretty tough pickings, eating like, you know, cereal with water and stuff like that. And so I went door to door selling my toys. And I took this famous picture that I had with like the change and the money in my hand that I had gotten. And I realized at that moment, I had an epiphany, like that was a moment that changed me because I realized I was going to save myself. I just knew it. I said, there's nobody coming to save me. It's going to be me that's going to get me out of this situation. And from that moment on, I was only 7. That was it. I realized I started putting plans in place, things in place, and working on ideas and concepts that would help me in the future to escape that location, that place that I was in, which I eventually did.
Was there any sort of mentor figures in your life that you could follow or follow in their footsteps or help guide you along this path and figure out the steps to get out of the situation you were in?
Unfortunately, there was no human mentor and third dimension person. It was just the books that I was reading. I was reading books. I was devouring books like you wouldn't believe. I was, you know, reading, you know, real books, not like See Jack Run and stuff like that. I was reading novels. You know, I remember as a very young age reading Jack London, The Sea Wolf, and books like that. So just understanding the perception and the concepts through some of the psychology books I was reading from, you know, and stuff like that. I was like, oh, okay, I was getting it at a young age, fortunately. And one thing that my father did do, he made me do book reports every single week since I was little. And so those book reports, it's not like you read something and you just, okay, a lot of people forget. They have no comprehension, no reading comprehension. But when you do a book report, it forces reading comprehension. So I was comprehending. So that regimen of doing all those book reports for all those years, every single week, it developed in me this ability to comprehend what I was reading and be analytical and be able to ask questions, and then be able to ask myself a question and then go research my own question and find the answer to that question. So that really helped me. That was one of the best things he ever did for me, which is why I dedicated my second book to him.
At what point did you become so fascinated in like ancient civilizations and cosmology and all of this kind of stuff?
It's really interesting. So I really, at an early age, I was interested in it. I wasn't fascinated yet. I was like, the pyramids and, you know, the 7 wonders of the world, because I was reading books about it. And I was like, wow, I'd like to see these one day. But it wasn't this burning passion desire yet. It didn't really happen for me until much later. I think it was, let's see, Justin right now, my youngest son is 20, going to be 23 soon. So it must have been 25 years ago. I was looking into, you know, pyramids and the structures, and I realized that these things seem technological in some kind of way, the way that they're constructed. I started really understanding that we didn't have the technological capability right now to duplicate some of these things. So I said, I have to go somewhere. I need to go somewhere to see something that's ancient, that's built, and that's not going to cost me that much money because I didn't have a lot at the time. And that was kind of close. First time leaving the country, I went to Mexico. I went to Chichen Itza in the Yucatan Peninsula. And so I flew into Mexico, and I thought I was rich because I converted $500 American back then into Mexican pesos, and I had all this money. And then a sandwich cost like $100, and I said, "Oh, I'm not rich." But I went down there in that bus through the jungle to get to Chichen Itza, and then this whole incredible place opens up when you get there and you see it. And I was just like blown away. I climbed the Pyramid of Kukulkan, which you can't do anymore. They've stopped people from doing that now because unfortunately something has happened with some tourists defecating up there, some crazy thing.
Jesus.
But I took a famous picture of myself at the top of that. And I just realized, wow, this is what I really want to do. I want to travel the world and see these things. Yeah. Much later, though, in about 2010, I had this very strange experience, which it took a long time to talk about it because it was a bad experience for me in some ways. In some ways it was good, in some ways it was bad. It was like one of the catalysts for my divorce. Even one of my sons is still kind of, standoffish because of it. But I had this experience in the house where, from my perspective, sitting there watching ESPN Sports at about 9:00 p.m., the room turned lavender. I looked over my left shoulder. The TV shut off too. I looked over my left shoulder. I thought my boys were playing a trick on me. When I turned back, two what you would describe as gray aliens were in front of my face. And I didn't know what to do. I tried to scream. No sound was coming out of my throat. Whatever they were doing was making my brain shake in my skull. And then as fast as that happened, they just turned around and they kind of dangled away. They don't even walk like a regular walk. It was like a dangle. I can't really explain it. And then the lights came back, the TV came back. I ran around the house frantic. Nobody heard or saw anything. It scared the hell out of everybody, especially my wife at the time. She had just about had enough. That was like the last straw. I didn't talk about it for a long time. I never went public with it until probably, I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago or so, because I really got nothing out of it but negativity. But I felt like it was a time to start explaining this. And the reason why I'm bringing it up now, based on your question, is because one thing the part that was good out of that situation was this phrase, worldwide telescope, was burning in my mind over and over again. It just came out of nowhere. Worldwide telescope, worldwide telescope, worldwide telescope. I get up, I go on my computer, I go to excite.com because back then Google wasn't the main one yet.
What year was this?
This is a 2010.
Okay.
I type in worldwide telescope, and then worldwidetelescope.org is the first search result. I almost fell out of my chair. I click on it. Back then you had to download the software and install it. Now you can just use it without installing. It's an option because HTML5 is out now, so you can do both. But anyway, I installed the software. I open it up. It gives you the sky view. You can go into 2-mass infrared mode, all these different satellite modes. It gives you all the space probe data for all the missions that have ever gone off into space from Earth. And it gives you access to the data and also the rover images, but from the perspective of the rovers on Mars. And it's all publicly available. Taxes paid for all this. And so you log in, I saw okay, Mars, interesting. Let me click on Mars. Then from Mars, I go and I see panorama. I go, okay. Then I see rovers. I go, rovers? Wow, the rovers are in here? I click on opportunity rover. Now I'm on the mast cam and I'm zooming in, zooming out, panning left and right. And I started seeing anomalies. But the anomalies that I was seeing, to answer your question, are things that look similar to ancient structures on Earth. And I go, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Is this really Mars? So I start downloading these images and screenshotting them and analyzing them. And they're really Mars images hosted on Caltech servers. Some are on washington.edu. And I'm like, this is incredible. So I start comparing to now I've got a really crazy passion for this because now I'm hunting down every ancient site and trying to see how do these sites connect to what I'm seeing going on Mars. And then I came across the Enuma Elish and the 7 tablets of creation from ancient Sumeria. And it talks about they had beings named the Igigi living on Mars, running a concurrent civilization that was on Earth and both on Mars. And that just blew me away. And from there, I just dove headfirst into the whole thing.
So this was immediately after you had this encounter or sighting in your living room?
Yes. Yes, it was.
And so you had just this idea of what was it called? What's this website called?
Worldwide
Worldwide Telescope.
That's
just
it.
Burning
That's it
in
right
your
there.
mind.
Yeah.
So
Well,
you
that's
think?
it,
What
man.
do you think? Do you think that they were trying to communicate this to you to go find this stuff?
That's the only thing I could think of. They didn't give me anything like a telepathic that I can understand in terms of words, like the English language, but my brain was shaking in my skull. Like it was painful. And then it just stopped, and then they just left. But that phrase just over and over thousands of times.
Now, when you said the room turned a specific color and the TV went off.
Yeah, turned lavender.
Lavender.
And the TV went whoop, shut right off.
Did anybody else hear the TV go off or see the color change?
Listen to this. The house was full. I had 2 daughters in the 2 rooms on the east wing, 3 boys on the west wing in their rooms upstairs. It was a split floor plan. Wife at the time in the master bedroom, first floor, behind the living room on the other side of the wall that I was sitting in, family room, and nobody saw anything. Nobody came out of their rooms. Nobody saw anything. All they did was get frantic and scared, and it would cause all kind of problems, arguments.
They got frantic and scared because you told them about it immediately.
Yeah, and I was hype. You know what I mean? It just happened to me. What had just happened was totally unreal, like in a real close encounter of the 5th kind, and it just freaked everybody out. It was a it's still today. My son Giovanni, he says, I'm afraid to go to your house, and that's still, and he's 27 now.
Is this the only time anything like this has happened to you besides the using that UFO in your front yard when you were 7?
That's it. Only time. Yeah, never happened again. Yeah. But I've been on this path of discovery into ancient civilizations ever since, based on what I saw on there. And since I've come across that worldwide telescope, I put together a team of anomaly hunters, and we actually hunt space anomalies through most of this data. And we've downloaded now over 1 million images from NASA, Caltech, Washington.edu, and all the other European Space Agency, India Space Agency, and the Russian Space Agency. And we've cataloged over 60,000 space anomalies, most of which, a lot of them have made the news, CNN, Fox, you name it. They've been on TV and everything.
To you, what are the most astounding anomalies or photos that are on Mars that really blow your mind?
There's so many. But
is there a way we can see them on here?
Yeah, maybe we can probably go in. So if we go to...
Pardon this brief interruption, but I want to take a minute to talk about this incredible supplement that I've been using for over a year now after it was recommended to me by nutritional scientist Dr. Dominic D'Agostino on this podcast. I take Dom's advice when it comes to anything related to nutrition, diet, and longevity, because as we get older, these things become more and more important. That is why I started using Verso. Verso is a company that is dedicated to translating scientific breakthroughs into products that hold the potential to increase longevity. I take Cell Being, this one right here, which contains nicotinamide mononucleotide or NMN-based supplement, paired with naturally derived micronized trans resveratrol and TMG. These 2 chemicals are actually precursors to what's called nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, which is commonly known as NAD. And NAD is essentially the precursor to energy, cell repair, and longevity. If you've ever tried fasting or even intermittent fasting and you've gotten that feeling of super high energy or mental clarity, it's because your body is activating these genes called sirtuins, which are actually longevity genes. The downside is as we age, NAD declines. When I found out I could naturally increase my body's activation of sirtuins and naturally activate my body's production of NAD, I was sold. And it is so much more affordable than doing NAD IV drips. Head on over to ver.so and use the coupon code CONCRETE at checkout to save 15% on your entire order. That's KONCRETE at checkout and get 15% off your entire order, or you can just go to ver.so/KONCRETE. It's linked below. Back to the show.
Hey, we're on Mars.
That looks like Mars.
We're on Mars. Now, you see that rock on the right there?
Yeah.
Let's zoom in over there.
This one right here?
Yeah, zoom in pretty close to that one. Let me see if this is, to the right, a little bit more to the right. Okay, zoom in over there.
Wow, this is pretty incredible, the resolution of this.
Yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. You'll see an anomaly right there, first of all. You see this one on the left right there? By the next left to the X, of the plus sign, I'm sorry?
Yeah.
That is not a rock.
Sitting on top of the flat one, you mean? Looks like a seagull almost sitting there?
Well, no, you see that big triangular shape?
Yes, yes.
That's not a rock. It's got symmetry. It has 3 open places on it. If you zoom out just a tiny here, I don't know if you can do that. Yeah. So you can see, now look at the surrounding terrain outside of this what looks like debris up there,
Right.
that particular object doesn't appear to be a rock from the surrounding terrain.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at it, I've never seen a rock. So you have to compare what rocks look like to an Earth. I've just never seen a rock that just stands up like that and has that type of shape and has that type of structure to it. And if you were able to take that and pull it into a photo program and really zoom in close with an actual magnifying glass, because when you use a magnifying glass, you don't lose the resolution like you do when you're zooming in with computer zoom.
Right.
And so then all of a sudden you begin to see all the aspects of the anomaly. So that's something that we would catalog as an anomaly. Now, if you zoom out, let's show you, see if I can find one more in this area, because I haven't been here in a long time.
Yeah, but there's like a whole like cluster of
all that's all debris.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, all that stuff there is actually artificial. A lot of that stuff is not not rocks. If you scroll,
when you say artificial, what do you mean specifically?
In other words, I think that some of that stuff is broken pieces of something. There was a global flood on Mars. Mm-hmm. And the evidence of this is a lot of the things that we do find appear to be partially submerged in some of the sand, or what looks like wet sand. We know that there is mud there, and now we also know that there's billions of tons of liquid water because they've announced it officially.
Couldn't that be fragmented parts of a comet or an asteroid?
It's possible. It's possible, but it's very hard.
It looks like there's kind of a crater behind it.
Well, that's actually not a crater. That's just a little bit of a area behind the hill. That's like when you come up that little hill, it's actually not even that steep of a hill. Yeah. And that area behind it's not that large. There's a measuring tool that you have in there too. You can measure a lot of the size of this stuff.
Right.
That thing right there is only like 4 or 5 feet tall, that piece there. But if you scroll to the right more, there's a piece sticking out of a hill. Let me see if I can find it again. It's been a long time.
Oh, look at that little shiny area, like white.
That's water and frozen. That's frozen water, basically.
How much water did you say there is on Mars?
They've now found billions of tons of liquid water, and they've officially announced it. They actually
is this underneath the surface, or
no?
where?
They found a surface lake, 12 hectares lake. They found. They've also found other pools of water, and they even showed on a NASA press release on video during the day. I think it was about 4 years ago. Water coming down the side of a mountain.
Really?
Yeah. So there's a lot of water there. Keep going a little bit more. Yeah, I'm just going by memory. Okay, zoom in right there where your arrow is, where your cursor was. I'm sorry. Yeah, right there. Yep, right on that thing. Zoom in there. Now that's interesting.
Yeah, it's in a similar rock to the other one, right? It looks almost the same.
It's pretty similar, but it's something that's sticking out of the side and hanging over the ledge of a hill. Now, if you look at the back piece, well, on an image program, you can see that it's connected. It's just really, really dusty.
Yeah.
But there's something connects that whole piece at the top on that hill. Again, just another anomaly. Again, it's hard to find rocks that are shaped like that. It doesn't match the surrounding terrain. You can see the front piece of it to the left, almost at the edge of the screen at the top left, right there.
Yeah.
A little bit more over. This is one connected piece.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, is there any objects that look like they were man-made or anything that, like, what would you say on here resembles things that we have on Earth besides these rocks? I mean, these just look like rocks to me.
Yeah, we got to go through a whole bunch of over images. So if we go back out, we'll have to go find another panorama.
What is that? Is that Bigfoot?
It's a weird thing. It's a
what
weird
is
object.
that?
Yeah, if you click on it, you can probably, hopefully they get bigger when you click on them. Oh, that one stays kind of small. But that's an object that is really bizarre. Again, you look at the surrounding terrain, it didn't seem to match. It went viral. This one made the news and everything. It made all the mainstream news channels.
And what happened? So go to that link, that NASA link to the right. I want to see what this looks like. Yeah. So this is the source photo of that.
Yeah.
And this is an area zoomed in. So somewhere in here, we have to play Where's Waldo, and you can see that.
Yeah, you'll have to zoom and find it, and it's in there.
I mean, this will take us forever. We don't.
Yeah,
holy crap, that's crazy. Look at that resolution.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy.
That is incredible.
Yeah, it takes us hours to find the anomalies because we literally scan centimeter by centimeter. We take an image that big, and you go centimeter by centimeter with your magnifying glass.
Yeah. Go to some of the other photos on the Facebook. To you, what is what stands out the most out of all of these anomalies?
Okay, go forward. go forward. Even that's a 4 mile wide face. But these tubes are amazing. They've been on the news. These tubes run for miles. They're huge. They're massive. They actually are these tubes that run in and out and all around the planet in certain areas. And they're hollow on the inside, and they're not rocks, clearly. And what's interesting is, if you see where that arrow is, down from the arrow, you see where 2 tubes kind of almost run into each other. They have these ribbed type things that are keeping the tube, the structure open, so it's hollow on the inside. The purpose of it, nobody has a clue.
Huh.
Yeah, and they run for miles.
What do you speculate they are?
I think they're just a transportation or navigation underneath. Everything for me, I think it makes sense to build underground there.
Really?
This is the first thing that I found. This is my very first anomaly. Now look at this. All I did was I just pulled out the anomaly and blew it up. I just, spread it out. There's no enhancement. There's no anything. But I'm labeling them. One looks to be on the left, looks like technology. The other thing looks like a sphinx type of an object. And the other thing looks like, again, more technology. Just in my eyes, what I see there. In the background, it could be a pyramid. I don't know. But to me, these things don't look like they belong in that area. There's even something to the far right underneath that left arrow that is also anomalous. If you go to another one, what's that doing on Mars? That's not a rover. NASA, when we emailed them, they said they don't know what it is. They said,
is that the actual size, or is it supposed to be magnified in that circle?
It's magnified. It's up there in the right corner. See it up there in the right corner?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's sitting right out there. Yeah.
Okay. Hang on. Pull up that NASA link in the description, Austin. See if we can find this one. Okay, it's right there.
You got to zoom in a little bit more somehow. Yeah.
Can't zoom in any farther?
No.
Your technology won't allow you?
Yeah.
2022. Wow. Yeah, that is strange, isn't it?
That's strange. Now, what can you? I mean, that anybody who sees something like this for the first time, they're gonna go crazy, and they're gonna dig into this stuff. And just was one more I got to show you before we go on. I don't want to wait. We can extend this if we have to. Look,
absolutely.
Go down right there. Click on above, up, right there. Now, what's that doing on Mars? That's the last image taken by Spirit rover before it went offline and never broadcast another image ever again.
When was this taken?
That Spirit rover's last image, that was probably about maybe almost 10 years ago now.
Click on the, let's look at the source link from NASA's website.
Oh, they took it off.
Oh, wow. It's not on there anymore.
They took it down.
Yeah, that is incredible looking, right? It almost looks like a DeLorean with like a camping traveler thing on top.
It's weird. And if you see the shadow out of the back, I can only relate that to like a turret, a gun turret.
Yeah, that is wild.
Yeah, that's huge. So there's even a thing up there that looks like an airplane, which is on this same photo file.
So I'm so fascinated by this stuff, but the problem is you could spend so much time on these websites looking at this stuff and finding this stuff, but you can't do anything with it.
Yeah.
All you can do is just like blow people's minds, but no one will take it seriously.
Well, I think it's actually has been taken seriously, because now there are literally millions of people following us on the anomaly pages that we have in the anomaly groups. Some groups have 140, 150,000 people in each group. And these people have now become researchers and digging into it. But what it does for me, it verifies the fact that anomalies are there that are unexplainable, even though we're not there. They don't look like rocks. Even NASA says they don't know what they are. If you read the Enuma Elish and the 7 Tablets of Creation, or the Atrahasis epic, when they talk about the Ijiji occupying and living on Mars with advanced technology and visiting and going back and forth from Mars to Earth, this to me verifies that story in the ancient Sumerian tablets.
Okay, those tablets that you just, I don't even know what you just said, but
the Enuma Elish and the 7 Tablets of Creation, one of the most
Enuma Elish. Okay.
The Bible is plagiarized from the Old Testament, is plagiarized from the Enuma Elish.
Oh,
a lot of the Old Testament is coming from there, but they kept out a lot of the stuff talking about beings living on other planets. In the modern day Bible, God is actually mistranslated as God singular, when in true reality, when you go back into the ancient text, it's really gods with an S. They took off the S to make it the monotheistic mindset. And then you realize that it's when you read the Enuma Elish and the Atrahasis epic, you realize that they copied all that ancient text and put it into a lot of it into the Old Testament of the modern day Bible.
So is this all written in stone?
Yeah, it's all written in stone.
These are literal stone tablets.
Stone tablets, cuneiform stone tablets. I've done lectures on this stuff. I've done a 12-hour lecture just on the Enuma Elish, 12 hours just on the Atrahasis.
How did you get your hands on these things, or did you just read them from images of them, or how did?
Now, here's the beautiful thing: these have been translated since the 1800s. So, Cambridge and the British Museum have translations, and then UCLA did an amazing thing. There's over 1 million tablets that have now been out there, and they've got hundreds of thousands translated. UCLA cataloged all the tablets digitally online. And made an online tablet translator called the UCLA CDLI Cuneiform Digital Library. And you can go there and take a tablet off the shelf and drop it into a translator and read it for yourself.
No way.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild.
Oh, yeah.
And you did this?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I've done this. I've been to the British Museum in person as well. I've been to the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, England as well, and looked at these tablets with my own eyes. And I've got pictures of me obviously standing next to them, but they're real tablets. And I've done lectures on this for the last, 4 or 5 years. These tablets are amazing because this is as close as we're going to get to the truth. And they're talking about beings living in other planets, coming to this planet, engaging mankind, teaching mankind about weapons, war, genetically modifying humans for the purpose of turning us into slaves to do a lot of the labor for them. And living on Mars. And
how many years ago were these tablets created, apparently, or supposedly?
The most recent version is back around 6,000 to 7,000 years ago, which is why, there goes the translator site, which is why the Bible, people who believe in the Bible believe the earth is only 6,000 years old, because the story is copied from 6,000-year-old tablets. That's the beginning of the creation of the earth, is in the Enuma Elish. That's actually the creation of our entire solar system is in there. The earth is just a small part.
What civilization was 6,000 years ago?
Sumerian.
The Sumerians.
The Sumerians.
And those were the first humans?
No, they weren't the first humans, but it was the beginning of
organized
civilizations. It wasn't even really the beginning. It was just as far back as we can go. Now we can go back a little further as of recent, because of Göbekli Tepe and Derinkuyu in Turkey. We know now 13,000 years.
But like the official narrative of the history of humanity was around 200,000 years ago. Is that right? And that was supposed to be the Stone Age.
Homo sapien shows up all of a sudden out of nowhere.
Right.
And then within a short period of time, obtains and learns all this knowledge. According to the Book of Enoch, which is one of the apocryphal books left out of the Bible, but he's important because he's mentioned in the Bible.
Enoch.
Okay. The Book of Enoch. These beings came from heaven to earth, and then they have names. They taught human beings technology, how to make weapons, how to even make beer and all this other crazy stuff. And then they took Enoch on a trip to the Earth's atmosphere and beyond, and he saw the Earth and the shape of the planet as a sphere, and how he saw that he was living on a giant ball. And then brought him back. Yeah, this is all in the Book of Enoch. The only Bible that has the Book of Enoch in it is the Ethiopian Bible. It's the only Bible in the world that actually incorporated the Book of Enoch into their canonized text. The rest of the Bibles omitted the Book of Enoch. And the wars of these gods can be found in the Book of Deuteronomy. The wars of the gods, these are the Atlantean wars that everybody's trying to figure out what happened. It's in the Book of Deuteronomy in the Bible. All the wars are right there.
But you say a lot of this was omitted from the Bible, right?
Yeah, but the Deuteronomy is actually in there.
The Deuteronomy. And so what is the Deuteronomy?
It's a book in the Bible.
It's a book in the Bible, okay.
The modern day Bible. Anybody can go open their Bible and go, oh, Deuteronomy, let me read this. They don't read it, especially in Bible study. But the reason why is because you have God, which is actually gods, plural, going to war against other gods in other towns and cities and other regions of the planet, and sending human beings to these places to go to battle, and sending angels with them with battle gear on to fight and kill. And the words are, Go there, get in, kill the women, kill the children, kill the animals if need be. And if you see any women that you like, you can rape them. These are the exact words used. I want you to get a Bible and look it up. And if you decide you rape him, if you decide you want to keep him as wife, you can take him, but bring the spoils of war back to me. This was these internal battles going on from one region of the world to another region of the world, stealing and fighting over humans and resources. These people have become so evil, fighting against each other and utilizing human beings as chattel. And that's all in the book of Enoch. So God is good and loving and he's all the same all the time. But all of a sudden you read the book of Enoch and you go, what's going on? You know, the book of Deuteronomy, you read the book of Deuteronomy, you go, what's going on here? These aren't exactly the stories that, described. I don't think it's talking about the creator of the universe in that book.
So, okay, I want to kind of I want to unpack this in kind of like a linear timeline of your personal discovery of this. So you had that experience in your living room.
Yeah.
You decided to go on the telescope website, the global telescope, and find all these things. At what point did you become aware of these ancient texts and go translate them and learn about them?
When I started Googling and trying to find if anybody was looking at these anomalies, I came across information about the Anunnaki. That's the name of the beings that, according to the ancient texts, came from heaven to earth. In the Egyptian culture, they call them the Natiru. And they said they came to earth and turned mud into a kingdom. In the Bible, they call them the Anak. They have these names in all different cultures. They all show up around the same time in every culture. And I started finding more instances of them in every culture I looked into around the same time period. And I go, these people really came here at some point in the distant past. It seems to be now around 450,000 years ago they arrived. And about 200,000 years ago, according to the text, not me, they started genetically tinkering with human beings, saying they were adding their essence to them to get us to do the labor for them. So around 200,000 years ago, they started tinkering with us. And there's a famous cylinder scroll and with some text at the British Museum with Isis, the goddess Isis, who was one of the original Sumerian pantheon, not Egyptian, Sumerian. And she's holding up a baby and she says, the first Adamu, which means first man, my hands have created it. And she claims to have taken this baby to term for 10 months in her own womb to create the more modern version of Homo sapiens sapien.
Okay, so what is, in your description, what was the Anunnaki?
The Anunnaki, well, the term itself means those who came from heaven to earth. And these Anunnaki are beings that came from outside of earth to earth, from many different places, potentially. Just like if you were to travel to Mars, right, and you met a Martian, they say, where are you from? You say, I'm an Earthling. You wouldn't say I'm from Tampa. Right. So it's the same thing. It's a generalized term. And so, but these Anunnaki, these are the original Atlantean people. They created an Atlantean civilization. How do I know this? The tablets, the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, which is my first book, is about the Emerald Tablets. It's a bestseller right now. It's #1 out of 3 million books on Amazon. Why? Because it's talking about the gentleman that ruled over the land of Chem before it was called Egypt for 14,000 years. He left behind these tablets that he authored himself. He didn't have a scribe write them. Back in the day, it was typical. If you were considered a god, you would have a scribe write your work. He wrote them himself. He talks about the Great Flood. He talks about civilization declining and having to be brought back to a high level. He talks about all this stuff in the Emerald Tablets. And he covers everything from A to B. He talks about having technology in the Emerald Tablets. He has a ship that doesn't sail in the ocean. It flies into the sky until the earth disappears, until he gets to the place appointed, and then it descends from the sky back down to the land. This is 36,000-year-old text. And what's interesting about this text, where Jesus is talking in the Bible, quoted as saying things in the New Testament of the Bible, I have side by side the verses from the Bible and the verses from both the Atlantean. Guess what? They're the same. But which came first, the chicken or the egg? One is 2,000 years old and the other one is 36,000 years old.
Yeah. Well, the fascinating thing, I've had Randall Carlson on here, and he told me all about the Great Floods, the Younger Dryas cataclysms that happened. I think it was like 12,500 years ago.
Yes.
Which was a series. It was there's actual scientific geological evidence of a series of cataclysms that happened.
Yeah. That
could have been comets, could have been volcanoes. There's a multitude of things, but I think the evidence points to mostly it was comets, series of comets from the Taurid meteor stream that came and wiped out a majority of living species on Earth. And you can see that through not only geological evidence with the black mat layers of ash that are frozen underneath ice, but there's also evidence from when they look at the climate on Earth from throughout history.
Yeah, you can look at the ice cores.
The ice cores, right?
Yes.
I think they drilled like miles of ice cores in Antarctica.
Yes, you can see several global floods that happened.
Several.
Yeah, so the Younger Dryas is just one.
Which is apparently the most recent one, right?
Most recent one is the Younger Dryas. It decimated the entire ice sheet, sending water and mass of ice into the oceans, creating a global flood, which would have been the most recent flood that we've had. Even all the way down to Africa, to the tip of Africa, this thing created floods, which is why I believe the Sphinx is much older than we think, because the Sphinx couldn't have been built 12,000 years ago. It had to be built prior to that Younger Dryas era.
Another fascinating thing, going back to evidence of this, of the evidence proving that the timeline, the official narrative of the timeline of these civilizations, especially when it comes to ancient Egypt, is way off. There is, I had this guy, Ben Van Kirkwick. He has a YouTube channel called Uncharted X. And he goes to, he basically discovered this evidence in Egypt of these basalt rocks and these pieces of granite that have been clearly machined. With there's like core drills, like perfectly circular cores taken out of this rock, and on like the Mohs scale of hardness of like the hardest and softest rocks on Earth. These are like the top 3 hardest rocks that exist on Earth. And even today, it would be extremely difficult for us to carve these stones with the tools that we have today. And these like perfectly, there's these giant like 8-ton rocks that look like they were cut with, it looks like it was a hot knife cutting through butter, with how perfect they are and how perfectly symmetrical they are.
It's incredible.
Some of this evidence is astounding, and it can't even be explained. In addition to that, there's pottery that is made out of these rocks that is perfect. It looks like it was pottery that was thrown on a wheel. But it's the hardest stones that exist on Earth.
Incredible, because those stones can only be cut with those stones or diamonds.
Right, exactly.
Yes, I know.
And that's the first time I became aware of actual physical evidence that cannot be explained by modern science or academia. And they don't really entertain the conversation when people try to talk about it or people try to confront them about it.
Because it goes against the standard quo, the theory or the theme that they've already set up, and this is the way we want to have it, this is the way we want to say it, because if we change it now, it's going to create so many questions, and it's going to also destroy a lot of careers.
Yeah, that's the problem with it, right? There's a lot that's tied up when it comes to money, especially when it comes to like governments that rely, like in Egypt. I know that a huge part of their revenue stream is tourism. And that relies on telling the story of the ancient Egyptians. How many times have you been to Egypt?
4 times.
4 times.
I just took a tour there, 70 people. I just got back.
Wow.
So I had the largest tour ever taken through those sites. We had VIP access. I was the tour guide. I'm the speaker. They gave us access. They cleared Giza out. Everybody out. Forbidden knowledge is here. We had private access to the grand gallery of the pyramid. We're in there meditating. We're going underneath the pyramid, going in shafts, going into the Queen's chamber. Private access to the Great Sphinx, military guards to go down there and actually got to some of the underground shafts that exist at the Sphinx that people don't even know exist. They're there.
Those, I've seen photos. It's pretty wild.
Wild stuff, man. Why they go way down. You can't even see the bottom. And then you'll be able to stand in the middle of the Sphinx's paws and touch the dream stela. It's pretty cool. So I took the whole crew, everybody who came, we took them down there. They had a great time and took them out into the desert to Dendera, into hidden crypts that were never opened before. I took them to a temple of Isis on the property of Dendera, which has been locked for 30 years. And the temple priest gave me the key to open it and let my people in. And we saw technology on the wall, jet pillars with electrical cables connected to what looked like light bulbs in pristine condition. Not the ones underneath the underground crypt at Dendera, but that everybody knows on TV, but the ones that nobody's ever seen before, they're in there. So we had a great trip, and I showed him evidence of technology all over the place, including the Temple of Seti at Abydos with the helicopter, the tank, the airplane, and and it looks like a submarine, and the hieroglyphs, and it just blew everybody away.
Yeah, Austin, maybe you can pull up some of the Uncharted X photos of some of the stones that are out there. But I mean, he was talking about in some of these pyramids. I think he was talking about one of the main ones was the Saqqara.
Saqqara, yes.
Saqqara,
yes.
Yeah, and there's like these 8 to 10 ton granite boxes that are in there that are like perfectly symmetrical and smooth.
Incredible, absolutely incredible.
One of the things that he said that really stood out to him was on these giant granite boxes that are that looked like they are created by some sort of super advanced technology. The hieroglyphs look like it was kindergartners that just found this and just started carving stuff into it, because it looks like stone chisels were used to carve these hieroglyphs, but it's not the same it's not the same technology.
No. Somebody found it much later and started playing around with it, which happens. A lot of the stuff in Egypt in the dynastic era was already there when the dynastic era started. So a lot of the things that are really super megalithic and really old were there. They inherited those things. If you go to Mexico, where the Teotihuacan complex is located, which is a mirror of the Giza Plateau with the 3 pyramids aligning with Orion, the Pyramid of the Sun, Pyramid of the Moon, and so forth, those structures were there before the Mayans got there. And even the Mexicans will tell you that the Mayans inherited what was they built nothing. They even teach that in the university. They built nothing. Matter of fact, the Mayans didn't know who built that stuff, so they named them Teotihuacan. That's where the name came from. But when you go to the ancient text, you find out who built it. Thoth the Atlantean, who ruled over the land of Chem, ancient Egypt. He left because he was battling with his brother, Marduk, in the Bible. But Marduk is also known to the Egyptians as Amun-Ra. This is why people say amen at the end of every prayer. He's the one who said, at the end of every giving thanks, you say my name. That's where amen comes from. He left because of battling with his brother, and he went to Mesoamerica, and he took Olmecs with him. And they kickstarted and built the Teotihuacan civilization. So the evidence is all there. It's all in tablets.
So what was his name? What the Atlantean?
How do you say it? T-H-O-T-H. Thoth. Some people say Toth or Thoth. I call him Thoth. In Sumerian, he's known as Nigazida. In the Mexico or the Mesoamerican area, like Teotihuacan and Chichen Itza, he's known as Kukulkan, Lord Pakal, Viracocha. He's the Flying Serpent. All these different names. Just like in Greece, he's known as Hermes. In Rome, he's known as Mercury, Odin. If you go to the Library of Congress, there's 2 gigantic doors, and they have Thoth, the Atlantean, on one side, and Odin on the other. They know who this guy is.
And how many years ago was he, apparently, according to the texts?
54,000 BC is when he was ruling over the land of Chem.
Which is how many years ago from today?
Oh, that's a long time, man. We're talking about 56,000 years ago. Yeah, 56,000.
56,000.
Yeah, and in his tablets, he says he went to the land of Chem to kickstart civilization after the flood. Means it was already at a high level before the flood, or whatever disaster happened. The temple was coming up out of the mud, and he went and rebuilt. Then he said, "I built the Great Pyramid, patterned after Earth's force." So he takes claim to building the Great Pyramid. It wasn't Khufu.
Right. It wasn't Khufu. Yeah, it definitely was not the dynastic Egyptians that built that.
They inherited it.
Why don't you think that like modern academia and people in the quote unquote Egyptologists, why won't they entertain any of these conversations?
It's just now starting to be entertained by Egyptologists. When I go to Egypt, I'm famous. The Egyptologists flock to me.
Really?
They ask for autographs. They take photos with me. The photos are all online. I'm like, everywhere I go in Egypt, I'm famous because I'm saying the things that they want to say. We did a live podcast on the Nile, and the Egyptologist was there, and she said, "We love Billy because he's saying the things that we can't say or we'll lose our jobs, and we believe everything he's saying. We know this for a fact. We've grew up learning about this thing, the real truth about our history, but we can't speak it to the general population or we're in big trouble." And so that's why they love me there. But they've already adopted it. The Egyptologists, the homegrown ones, have already adopted this information. The foreign ones haven't. But the big problem with this information is that it's detrimental to the system and the status quo. It literally would break down religious systems overnight. You're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar system that generates a lot of money for a lot of people, and those religious systems donate a lot of money to I call it polytricks.
Polytricks.
Yeah. And I'm talking about millions of dollars a year, right? And so all of a sudden that goes away. A religious system collapse globally would definitely affect the global economy almost overnight. But that will go away because people realize the information that they have been brought up learning is actually severely inaccurate, and that the information is based on plagiarized tablets, and the real stories are in the tablets. A full, unedited, undoctored human, when I'm going to change these words around here and there, you know, that's not done in the tablets. The tablets, what it says. When you come to the Bible, all of a sudden you get to a lot of text like Jesus saying, honor your slave master as you would honor me. Do you think that just guy would really say something like that if he's all this light and he's a light being and he's all about love and you know, salvation, and then he's telling you now, no, you better obey that slave master? Come on, that's somebody, you know, let me write this in there because it's going to benefit us. When you write this in, we can tell the slaves, hey, you see what Jesus said? You better listen to Jesus. So this is a lot of twisting and turning. The Bible is a remix, is what it really is.
Yeah.
You know, and so all of a sudden you bring this real information, all this stuff collapses overnight. We're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar control system gone like that.
Yeah, I mean, do you think it's sort of similar to what happened when the dynastic Egyptians found these structures and carved new pharaohs' faces in them and changed the names?
Right. Same thing. If we sat in here, if we say we had 10 more people in this room, and we sat in a circle, and I whispered something into one person's ear and said, take it around the entire, when it gets back to my other ear, the story ain't going to be exactly the same. It'll be close, but it won't be the same.
Classic telephone game.
Right.
Wow, man.
Right.
Wow. That is fascinating.
That's why I love the tablets, because I know, I'm not saying they're 100% accurate, but they're as close as I can possibly get. I'm taking out all these other steps in between that have happened between Islam and Christianity and Buddhism and all these other religions that have taken from the same tablets. Mm-hmm. And now I'm getting as close as possible to the original source as I possibly can. You know, so I'm reducing some of the error, you know, effect there.
Yeah. What do you think would happen if people became aware, or if people suddenly realized, like hypothetically, one of these UFOs landed on the quote unquote White House lawn, like they say, what would happen to society? Would it really fall apart? What would be the implications of something like this happening? I wonder.
You know, I think at this point now they've conditioned us so much with movies and stuff like that. There's two ways it can go. One way it can go, finally, where you guys been? We need some help here. The other way it can go is, you know, people become worshipers right away, because we have this gene in us, this worship gene, which was inserted into the human genome. We know this now because scientists have actually found the worship gene. You can turn it on and they can turn it actually off.
What?
Yes, we have a worship gene.
Worship gene.
That's right. And so it makes us want to worship something outside of ourselves, when in true reality, we should find the power inside. And this was inserted by the Anunnaki. That's my opinion. That's my hypothesis, I should say, on this one. But this gene has been found, but it's happened around 200,000 years ago. Now, something else happened around that same time. Chromosome number 2 in the human body was pulled out, fused together, and then 2 telomere caps are put on each end. Telomere caps have our genetic material that allow our cells to replicate. It has the biological buffer material in it. Now, when the buffer material runs out, that's when your body starts the death process. Now, around 200,000 years ago is when the tablets say this occurred at the Tower of Babel incident, which made it into the modern day Bible. The Tower of Babel incident, where in the Bible it's God who comes back, Yahweh comes back, and he sees the people building a tower into the heavens, and he gets pissed off and he destroys the tower, and he said, that's it, man's years will be 120, they'll never live more than that, and I'm going to confuse their languages and separate them and spread them out all over the planet so they can't talk to each other. But in the Sumerian tablets, it was actually Enlil, who's Yahweh in the Bible. He comes back and sees this, and he goes, oh man, these people are getting too smart. They're gonna realize they don't need us to rule over them. So he confused their language, broke everybody up, made different languages. There's only one language at the time. Then, the years will be 120, shortened the lifespan. Before then, people were living for hundreds of years. Now, the maximum lifespan that they found out at Harvard that a human being could live on average would be 120 if it wasn't for the poison and everything else going on. You know, toxicity in the foods and the atmosphere. And they discovered they started experimenting with mice, and they were able to stop the degradation of the telomeres and got the mice to live 3 times their normal lifespan. All this information would be mind-blowing information to come out if this truth was really told about our ancient past and what really happened. People would realize we've been altered, genetically modified. Our lifespans have been shortened so that we can be subjugated and ruled over. We never live long enough to really figure out what's going on. But by the time we figure it out, we're gone, and another generation starts over from zero again. And so we're at this precipice now. We need to be able to pass this information on from generation to generation and teach them the real, true ancient history so that we can break this cycle that we're in of this being a boot on our neck and being ruled over by a small handful of people. Less than 100 people on this planet control 8 billion people. Less than 100 people run the lives of 8 billion people worldwide. They know what you smell, eat, taste, touch, hear, think, and they control everything you do, where you can go, where you can't go. And so for us to take back control of this planet, we need to know this ancient information. We need to know what happened in the past so we can make a better future, because the past is prologue. We can't take control of this planet until that happens. And so to answer your question is this: once people understand this fundamentally, the true reality is we'll take back control of our planet. These beings, they don't land and walk around. They're waiting for us to grow up. I think that the ones that had subjugated us have been long gone after a last pyramid war that happened about 5,000 years ago. And the ones that are looking at us now, that we see these UFOs, UAPs flying around, not all of them are there, some are ours, but the ones that are from other places, they're watching us and they're looking and they're saying, you know what? They're still crawling. They're not ready for us yet. When they learn how to walk, when these 8 billion people, when these 8 billion take back control of their planet and stop allowing the less than 100 people to put a boot on their neck and divide them, and all these divide and conquer tactics, they don't love one another. They don't respect one another. They don't respect even themselves. When they grow up past that level, they almost show up. Because back in the ancient times, they would show up. People were so, the IQ wasn't there yet. We were just hunter-gatherers living around, and we didn't have a weapon to fire back at them. Now, somebody shows up. Everybody wants to try to take it out of the sky. We want to get this technology. We want to co-opt it. We want to reverse engineer it. Yeah. We want to weaponize it.
Territorial apes with thermonuclear weapons.
Scary. And, that's another thing real quick before we go on. They look at our planet and they go, okay, they know how to split the atom. Interesting. Oh, they've got weapons. Let me check out the codes on these weapons. We know this because UFOs have showed up at military bases and deactivated nukes in broad daylight, as testified before Congress by actual military officers and nuclear physicists. But they say, okay, well, they've got all these nukes aimed at their own planet while they're still on the planet with no escape hatch. So right there it tells you, they're saying, you know what?
It's so dumb, isn't it?
It's really bad. So they're saying, we're going to just keep looking. We have to just monitor and look at the situation and just keep seeing how long will it be before they wake up. That's what I think is happening. So that's why they don't land on the, in the front yard.
The crazy thing is they hang out on the fringe of being observable.
Yeah.
They don't make themselves, they obviously have the ability to make themselves completely invisible.
Yeah. But
they're choosing not to.
Right.
Like if you look at the incidents with the fighter pilots, witnessing them talking about, there's multiple fighter pilots, Ryan Graves and David Fravor, talking about their reporting flying by these objects, seeing them with their own eyes, additionally to seeing them on radars. And we're obviously very aware of it. Even like the New York Times is talking about it. So they're making themselves visible to the extent that we can see, holy shit, these things are so much more advanced than we are.
Right.
But they're not actually like landing and saying, aha, here we are. Nice to meet you. They're not saying hello.
Yeah. I think there's a sort of a prime directive that they have just based on the observation of what's been going on all this time with all this kind of like, we're here, but we're not here. We're hiding in different spectrums of colors, or we might be a cloud. We might not be the cloud, and it looks like a prime directive, as if they're have some type of a base law that we don't understand or know about, where they're not fully engaging us in a way that like you're talking about, because we know when we went to the Bikini Atoll in the I think this was the late 40s, early 50s, and started testing weapons, nuclear weapons. We took all those islanders and we moved them. And these people had never seen airplanes or other people before. Forget seeing airplanes. They'd never seen anybody but themselves, right? And all of a sudden, they created a cargo cult. They took reeds and sticks out of the bushes and created airplanes out of them. And they worshiped the planes. They tattooed USA on their chest. You got black guys walking around in the bush with USA painted on their chest. They make fake guns out of sticks that look like, AK-47s and so forth, or automatic weapons. And then they sit down on these man-made runways that they've dug out, and they look at the sky for hours, waiting for the sky gods to bring them back more cans of Spam. And I think the same thing would happen if a lot of these beings would just engage underdeveloped cultures that, you know, we're not ready for certain levels of understanding and technology yet in certain ways. You know, you still got people running around, you know, trying to steal stuff at the checkout at, you know, at Walmart. I mean, it's just, there's a certain level of IQ and maybe understanding and unconditional love that we need to have for ourselves and the planet, maybe before they just fully engage.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so many problems there, right, with humanity. There's so much desperation on Earth in different parts of the world that breed all these, you know, all these things, like crime and corruption and death and all the stuff. But I mean, going back to the UFO conversation, I don't know if you've ever heard of Dr. Robin Hansen, but he talks about this idea, this concept of grabby aliens. And he talks about if there is another alien civilization, there's two options that it would choose. If it was, you know, say millions of years ahead of us, it would become a grabby civilization, meaning it would do what us humans do, expand, control as much as we possibly can out into the universe and into multiple star systems. Or they would come to the conclusion that if we want to let these explorers go out and colonize other stars, we have to, we'll be essentially letting go of control of them. Right. And they can do whatever they want. They can come back and take us over. We have no control. So they would either choose that to let them go, or they would choose to control everybody or keep everybody on the planet and have like a one world government. And govern the whole entire world, and somehow have some sort of security guards, quote unquote security guards, there to make sure no one escapes the planet, or no one, if there are explorers that go out, have fail safes in place to make sure they don't colonize or become grabby. Right. And what his idea of what these, or one of his theories to what these modern day UFOs could be, is it could be one of these other civilizations that are just here to make sure we don't become quote unquote grabby, or we don't expand beyond our solar system, something around that.
I believe that's pretty accurate. I wrote I did a documentary, The Black Knight Satellite, Beyond the Signal. It just aired. We had a big movie premiere. It aired in some theaters actually. And now it's on my TV network, Forbidden Knowledge TV. And it's our #1 documentary right now. It's actually up for 3 film awards right now. Oh, wow. And there's this object orbiting Earth that is estimated to be there for 13,000 years. And how we get this number is the NSA analyzed the signal from it. A couple of astrophysicists analyzed the signal, and some ham radio operators back in the 50s also got the same signal, all independent, came up with the same translation, decoding of the signal, that it was saying it was from the Epsilon Boötis constellation. Now, I heard about this about 10 years ago, and I got really, really interested in the story, and I realized it was even deeper than that the article about this came out in Time magazine by one of the astronomers that was researching this thing and decoding the signal. And I said, Time magazine picked this up in 1960. Then I saw some reports of it following Sputnik, when Russians sent Sputnik to orbit the moon and come back. And I said, this thing has course correction. Then they discovered that it was in a polar orbit. It had changed course and went into a polar orbit, something we couldn't do until just recent times. We didn't even know how to get a polar orbit orbiting from pole to pole. In order to create a lot of the megalithic structures that you've seen, like the pyramid complexes and everything else, you need a polar orbit.
How come we haven't been able to have a polar? You're saying something orbiting the Earth, like from a up and down vertical.
Yeah, from pole to pole. So this is the Earth.
Instead of going around the equator, it's going the other. It's going.
We just got that. Maybe I think we ended up getting it official like in the late 1980s.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But this thing has been orbiting in a polar orbit from the 1950s. Everybody was looking up at the sky and tracking things in the sky as we were trying to go in the space race against Russia. And especially when Sputnik launched in 1960, everybody was looking up to the sky. Everybody was scanning the sky. We had some Mercury stuff going on. And the Black Knight satellite, the object itself is interesting because Epsilon Boötis comes up individually several times. So I looked into Epsilon Boötis. I'm like, well, let me research this place. found out there's something called a void there. This void is called the Boötes void. It's the largest known void in the universe. There's not even dust in this area, going on for about 250 million light years or some crazy spanning number like that. And so I saw Michio Kaku, the famous theoretical physicist, talking about it. And he said that in that void, it looks like light's being bent around that area. And he says that we think that it's potentially it could be a cloaked advanced civilization. And I was like, that's pretty interesting, because the Black Knight is giving up this location. Now you're saying it might be a cloaked advanced civilization based on, theoretical physicist hypothesis. So I looked into it a little bit deeper and discovered that Boötes is owned by Enlil from the ancient Sumerian tablets. These beings owned planets and moons, and some even owned constellations. So I'm like, wow.
So in these tablets, it says there's a guy named Boötes who owns...
Enlil owns Boötes.
Oh, Enlil owns this Boötes void.
And Enlil was the ruler of the earth at that time. And guess what Enlil had in the tablets? He had the all-seeing eye. The eye of Sauron, which has made it into the Lord of the Rings. He had the all-seeing eye. They copied that from the tablets. Wow. The Lord of the Rings copied it from the tablets.
Oh my gosh.
So he can see, now listen to this. He can see population densities on the planet. He can see who had crops, who didn't have crops. He can see weather patterns all over the earth. You can only do that with a polar orbiting satellite. Because as the Earth spins on its axis, the satellite's orbiting this way, and so as the Earth is as the satellite's orbiting this way, it's taking swaths of data,
right,
and it's scanning topography, it's scanning patterns, it's scanning everything you need, right? Barometric pressures and all that kind of stuff. You can see scanning densities. You can scan for population densities. All that can come from one satellite orbiting the planet in a polar orbit. He had that. He knew what was going on, and he was a pretty evil dude. If humans were getting too outrageous in one area or overpopulating an area, he would just have them killed. He would this is in the tablets, just kill them, kill 100,000, kill 200,000. He would dry their crops out. He would spray stuff on their crops and to dry them out so they can starve to death, all this kind of crazy stuff. This guy was just ruthless. He saw us just as animals. He didn't see us as real sentient beings. But this guy owned Boötes. So I said, wait a minute. So the more I dug into it, I realized that the Black Knight satellite, this object that is still orbiting our planet right now, NASA, it's on NASA's server. They call it space junk.
Space junk.
Yeah, they call it space junk. They don't know what it is. It's been there. The STS-88 mission did a flyby and caught a great HD image of this thing. It's about estimated 15 tons.
It's in our orbit.
Oh yeah, it's in our orbit.
So it's not far out. It's not outer space.
No. It's at Lagrange point 4, I believe.
Okay.
And it's orbiting out there, and it's still there. They won't mess with it because it makes no sense to mess with it. You don't know what type of self-defense system or mechanism this thing may have. But the reason why I think it's important, based on what you were telling me about the gentleman, is because I believe that this thing is watching us. That's what the whole documentary is about. And I have 20 incredible researchers in the documentary, including quantum physicists in the documentary with me, and astrophysicists. I think it's watching us, and I believe that it's using quantum entanglement to transmit everything in real time, what's going on Earth, back to home base at Boötes.
Wow.
And that this could be the grabby civilization that you're talking about, that is watching and making sure we don't get too crazy, because they don't want us to be a threat. They talked about us becoming a threat in the Sumerian tablets. In the myth of Adapa, they talked about it. They talked about it in the Atrahasis epic. They talked about it in the Epic of Gilgamesh. All these tablets, they talk about us potentially rising up and even superseding them. And making sure that we never found out that we don't need them. This is an ancient tablets, and now finding out that he is the constellation of Boötes is attributed to Enlil, and this thing gives off the signal to Boötes. And even in the NSA document, which is read in my documentary, it all comes together like, wow, what is going on here? So I think your guys' theory about grabby civilization, I believe it. I believe it 100%.
Yeah, it's It's a fascinating concept, and it makes a lot of sense. Another weird thing is which I find fascinating is the trans-medium aspect of these UFOs, like being in the water and going in and under the water. And it makes a lot of sense because the oceans are one of the things that we have explored very little of.
Yes, absolutely. You look at Christopher Columbus in his actual captain's log. He documents. Now think about this. You're talking about the 1400s, right? There's no light pollution. Right. Something comes up out of the ocean, a bright light, a gigantic bright light comes up out of the ocean and goes up into space. It's documented in his in his captain's log. You only write down things in a captain's log that are important.
Right.
And that's in there. So something came, yes, that's an anomaly. What is coming up with, there's no light bulbs back then. So what is it that came out of the ocean by the ship that can light up the sky?
Yeah. That's pretty fucking crazy, man.
Yeah.
What I heard you mention before, I wanted to talk about this, but I've heard you talk about in the tablets there's a different depiction of Adam and Eve, how they were created, and how that relates to the Anunnaki specifically. Right. Can you explain specifically how that was described in the tablets?
So in the tablets, they don't actually make a human being from like dirt and dust like it says in the Bible. Like they didn't create no dirt and just make a human being like magic. What they did was there was an existing hominid already on this planet. So the Ijiji was getting ready to go to war. There was going to be a coup against the kings of Earth. So they came from Mars to Earth. The gods, they fell from heaven. That really, they were the angels. They were a lower class than the level of Enki and Enlil. They didn't call them gods. They were like angels. They fell from heaven to earth. They came from Mars down to earth to go to war. And the Atrahasis, they encircled the camp in Africa of Enlil and Enki and Anu, who was their father. And they get ready to go to battle because their working conditions are harsh. They've been working for 250,000 years on their own. They call the years in shars, so it was a lower number, but each one shar is 3,600 years. So what you added up is 250,000 years. No women was one of the biggest complaints. And the biggest complaint was no women. And they felt like they were becoming slaves, even though they were volunteers for this breakaway civilization. And so the war almost happened, but then Enki, who's Enlil's brother, says, I have an idea. There's an existing being here. They're talking about our cousin, not Homo sapien. Something else was here already, our cousins. We can add our essence to it and get it to do our labor, to do your labor. And an agreement was made. This is in the Enuma Elish and a totally separate tablet called the Atrahasis Epic. 2 separate tablets saying the same exact thing, which is interesting because it corroborates the story. And so this was done. And so what they did was they first started with taking genetic material and then making these clones. But the problem with the clones was they couldn't reproduce on their own. You know, if you take a horse and a donkey and you get a mule, and a mule can't mate with anything. See what I'm saying? So they had added their essence to us. We were then a mule. We weren't able to mate. They had to keep trying to recreate more and more of us the hard way. Eventually, and they were doing this in a place called, it was in South Africa, called Adam's Calendar in Africa, which they discovered recently where the first 200,000-year-old gold mines were, because they were putting us to work right away mining gold. But anyway, so from there, they said, okay, these clones are here, but it's not working out properly. And that's when Nehursag, aka Isis, said, I'm going to take one to term. She took an egg out of a hominid, cleaned out some of the genetic material, added their essence to it. In other words, genetically modified the egg in some way. This is what we call in modern scientific terms making a zygote. And then in vitro fertilization in her own womb, 10 months later gave birth to Adamu, which means first man. And the famous cylinder scroll is in the British Museum of her holding up the baby saying, my hands have created it, the Adamu. And that was Adam. And then after that, there was this tablet that came out called the Myth of Adapa, which is also Adamu in a different way. But it talks about the fact that we are created in a way where Enki, for whatever reason, it pissed his brother off. He added something a little extra to us that he wasn't supposed to do. He gave us the capability of having, in the future, of superseding the Anunnaki themselves. And it made the Anunnaki relatives of his jealous of us and angry with us because he had created something that even long term could be better than them. Extra strands of DNA and all this other stuff that he incorporated into our genome that would allow us eventually one day to rise even above. And nobody knew why he did it, but it got him into a battle against his own brother. This is all in ancient tablets.
Wow. You know, one of the craziest things to me is that if these beings were so much more advanced than we are now, why would they have emotions like jealousy and anger and all these primal sort of emotions? I mean, these sort of things with our species are like the worst thing.
Right.
They're the reason we go to war and kill each other and people starve.
Yeah, and that's a great question. So when you read the beginning of how they started out, it appears that there was a galactic war millions of years ago in the Pleiadian star system. planets were being destroyed. They had weapons called the Brahmanda weapon, which would destroy any man on 3 worlds. They had these tablets of destiny, which whoever had control can destroy people's planets and moons. Debris. Imagine in this solar system, debris going everywhere and hitting planets, destroying civilizations. We would flee if we could. People started fleeing these star systems around the Pleiades millions of years ago, creating breakaway civilizations in other parts of the galaxy, different sector altogether. The Anunnaki people, these Atlantean people, they went and started off in another place. They had risen to a high level there. They had done away with the weapons of, then this is interesting, weapons of mass destruction. They had a weapon called a WMD.
Wow.
Yes. And they had done away with them. They were forsaken. But when a small group of these people broke away and came to kickstart a civilization here on Earth, they stole some of the WMDs and brought them with them. This is in ancient tablets. They put them hid them in a mountain and swore never to use them. But when they got here and they started doing what they were doing and they started breaking all their own rules, they began to realize there's nobody here to guard us. There's nobody here to stop us from doing this. And they said the creator of all is going to get us for this. They even believed somebody was higher than them. They realized that they were acting like the Wild Wild West here. And they started off very strict, and then they gradually, with nobody overseeing them really, they started like going back primal. In other words, the thoughts of war and this and the greed and all that crept back in. And eventually somebody went and got the weapons and they started fighting each other with the weapons. So it was this gradual process over 100,000 years or so between them coming in with a very strict set of rules and engagement and everything else and ideology until just collapsing over time and realizing, who's going to stop us? Who's going to tell me I can't do this? Nobody's going to come here and stop me from doing it. There's no law here. And then they just went rush out. They went crazy.
Backwards, kind of.
Yes, they went backward. They backslid hard. But it took a couple 100,000 years before they fully backslid.
Wow.
It's like raising a kid, and then all of a sudden you're a teenager. Now your mom says, okay, you can go out tonight. And you go out and you go, wow, I'm out. You know what? Well, no, my mom ain't here, but I could do this. Nobody's going to tell me to stop doing, so it's kind of like a teenager that gets left out there and with no guidance. And that's what happened.
When you create all the content you create, the documentaries, the videos, and produce all these movies and stuff, do you run into trouble when you try to recruit like mainstream scientists or cosmetologists? I tried to recruit James Webb to do the Black Knight satellite. And initially he said yes, and then he looked a little bit deeper into what I was talking about. He ran away quick. And then I had another astrophysicist from the university at Nova in Davie, Florida. And initially he was in, and then he dug a little deeper and he said, oh, no. So I've had situations like that. Fortunately, I've gotten on the Travel Channel, the History Channel, Discovery Channel, the Science Channel, Gaia TV. Now I'm on my own TV network. And so I've got so much popularity talking about these types of topics, these fringe topics. And so now, and a lot of them have been done in a very professional way. Now I'm coming up, I'm going to be on Ancient Aliens TV series, which is like the longest running series on History Channel right now. And so it's added a little bit more credibility. The fact that more people are opening up and talking about it, and it's on mainstream TV, it's giving people a reason to ask questions and talk about it versus it being some hidden conspiracy thing. And so it's become a little bit easier. When I did the Black Knight, I got probably about 5 or 6 no's, maybe 7, actually 7 no's. And then, but the rest of the other people, they were eager to come on board and share the knowledge and, participate in the documentary and many others that I'm working on also. Yeah, they get a lot of backlash from people in other people in their universities and their colleagues when they even entertain discussions like this.
Yes, yeah. They think they're going to lose their funding, their grant money. It's all about the money. It's never about the truth of what really happened. It's all about, well, if we do this, they may pull the funding, and it's all about how can I pay my bills?
Yeah, I remember even Avi Loeb, the guy who discovered the Oumuamua, he talks about this a lot. He had a lot of people were very angry with him.
Yeah.
And, a lot of it is also just jealousy because there's so many people that dedicate their lives to studying these things, and they're in the universities. And then one guy decides to step outside the line a little bit, and then they get all this attention. The guy's got a book, a super popular book. He's on all over the internet.
Yeah, he's going to be on my network soon.
Have you ever talked to him?
Not yet. No, I have my producer's been talking.
What do you think about that Oumuamua object that he found?
I think Oumuamua is an amazing artifact anomaly. I don't think it's a rock or a stone or any type of comet or asteroid. I think it's an actual remnant of an ancient galactic war that existed. To me, it ties into the ancient war theory that existed. There was another war that happened here that extended from Earth to the moon and then even to Mars. That Oumuamua to me is a relic of an ancient war. It even had, to me, it might be still operational. It kind of used the sun as a gravitational assist and shot itself out deeper into deep galactic space, intergalactic space. And the shape of it, to me, and everything else, to me, it spells artificially made, artificially constructed. I remember Comet 67P. I took images of that comet.
Which one was that?
That was the one we sent a mission to land on it, and we landed on it about 5 or 6 years ago.
Find this one.
Yeah.
67P, Comet 67P.
Yeah. And what's interesting, there were some openings on the comet, or there are some openings on the comet. And some of the images, now the images were coming in real time every single day from the satellite that is orbiting it, and actually a lander went to the surface. That's it there. And what's interesting is on some days, the openings look like something was in them. Not anything we can recognize, but we don't know how an opening can close and how an opening can be open again, how it can be blocked by something and how it can be open again. So I think there's a lot of stuff out there we just can't really explain. There's a lot more going on than we know. And there's a reason why they went to this comet and rendezvous with this, because this thing really, to me, it had something miraculous going on, and they wanted to take a closer look. I think that's why they spent the money and the resources to go to this comet.
Was this comet part of the Taurid meteor stream, or?
No, it wasn't. It's just another one of these objects that seems to just be floating around on its own, kind of a rogue comet. And we rendezvoused with it, and it's got weird things going on, weird gravitational fields that shouldn't exist. They landed something called the Philae lander on it, and they misjudged the gravity because based on their calculations, it has a certain gravity and it didn't have it.
Look at that, Austin. Blow up that picture where it says the comet in relationship to Los Angeles. Click no. Yeah, right there.
Right there. That's it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Holy shit.
It's a big one. That's a big one.
That thing is enormous.
Yeah.
I think there's one below it of it next to. Okay, there you go. Yeah.
If that hit Earth, we'd be done. We'd be finished.
Oh my God.
There's another comet out there called Apophis. Apophis is the size of Texas, and it came by about 10 years ago, and then it came by one more time, and it hit a gravitational keyhole on the last swing by, right between Earth and the moon. They didn't say anything about it till it left.
It came closer than the moon?
Yeah. And then it hit a gravitational keyhole. Now, what's interesting about it...
What is a gravitational keyhole?
Well, when you're on orbital mechanics, if you hit a gravitational keyhole, that means on the next approach to that same object, wherever it is in space, on your next approach to that object, you potentially can hit it. Okay. So you're looking at 2036 or something like that, we could potentially have a collision with Apophis, which is why Obama, when he was in office, he knew about this. They briefed him on this.
Apophis?
Apophis.
Okay.
He set a mission to start landing on asteroids and learning how to shift their orbits, because something like that, you can't blow it up. If you blow it up, it'll destroy the planet even faster, because it'll be giant chunks hitting the planet all over the place versus just one impact. But you have to learn how to shift the orbit by landing something on it and turning on some type of a rocket propellant to shift it out of its orbit, to take it into a different Lagrange point so it doesn't hit the planet. And so that's what they just actually successfully did that. I think it was actually a few months ago. We rendezvous. The mission was started when Obama was in office. They just landed.
No
That's how long
way.
it took to get to it. It was a executive order he signed to make this happen, to make sure that we knew how to move comets out of the way from hitting our planet. And we actually just did it. And so they're hoping that they can rendezvous with this Apophis if it's going to be on an approach that's going to be a collision course, so they can maneuver it out of the way.
How big was the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs? Do you know?
I don't know. You know, who knows when you're dealing with that kind of speed and impact.
Well, the crazy thing too is a lot of them blow up in the sky.
Right.
Like Tunguska, that thing exploded, I think 5 miles in the sky and just created like a shotgun blast.
Flattened everything for miles. Yeah. Yeah. Crazy stuff. So these things are there's just so much stuff out there. There's another object that orbits our Earth with the moon. So we actually have 2 moons. There's another object that's flipping around out there in its own orbit around Earth. It's not as big as the moon, but it's our second moon.
Really?
Yeah, it's been there for since forever, and it's on this weird orbit around Earth. It orbits Earth along with our moon orbiting Earth.
You know, there's a lot of people have some very strange theories about the moon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you think about the moon?
Well, I can only go by data points because, you know, I'm a data point guy. If you go to usgs.gov and download the satellite radar imagery of the moon, anyone can do this. Pull it into your computer. Ground penetrating radar is going to let you see what's 30 meters beneath the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And what you see is what looks like structures beneath the surface of the moon. With the naked eye, no editing, no photoshopping, just looking at it. There's videos on YouTube. You can pull them up all day long. You can find videos about the moon. There's one guy, Mars Anomalies, Chris Maroney. He was actually in my documentary. He's one of the top anomaly hunters in the world. He did a great video with the official images and all the source links on the substructures that appear to be in the ground penetrating radar images of the moon. And as you know, the moon rang like a bell when they crashed the lander into it.
Right.
And so, in my opinion, it's hollow. Now, I have something else. In another documentary I was in about the moon, but I think it was 2013, we got the Freedom of Information Act, the FOIA, on the black box for the Apollo 11. Now, we have the audio and we have the redacted printed document. And in the audio, which we play in the documentary, one of the astronauts is looking down as they're going across the moon looking for a landing site. And he says, look at those convex domes down there. And then Neil goes, I bet the people down there never get out. And that's on the black box audio. And it even made it into the redacted doc. They didn't redact that statement. It's still on the redacted official black box written statement from the Apollo 11.
Really?
Yeah. I bet the people down there never get out. Pretty interesting.
And how did you find this?
That's now available to the public, a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act.
Really?
It's now available to everyone. Anyone can download it now, the Apollo 11 black box audio. And then we also have the declassified documents from the Clementine mission, which was a low lunar orbiting satellite that the military sent up to the moon, very close to the surface. When I saw the name Clementine, I knew right away. I said, oh my God, this thing is not coming back. I bet I found out it never came back. And at the end, I found out it never came back, but it transmitted a lot of data and images that show anomalies on the dark side of the moon, on the back side of the moon. That's what primarily what they were after. Clementine, because, oh, my darling Clementine, you were lost and gone forever. That's an old country song.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew that song. And I knew right away when they named it Clementine, they never planned for it to come back. They claimed it crashed, but I knew that was part of the plan to leave it there. But it transmitted some amazing footage that's available actually online. Anyone can download in HD resolution, unobfuscated, of things that don't belong on the backside of the moon. So just a lot of crazy stuff that, you know, just goes on. It's wild.
It is. You know, the craziest thing too is that we can't freaking get back to the moon. It's been 50 years since we've been to the moon, and we can't seem to get. I think right now that I don't know. Did the Artemis mission ever happen? I know they postponed it like 3 or 4 times already.
Yeah, there's so many postponings about it, and you know, I don't know if it's now I know we do have that. They left that dish up there in one of the Apollo 14 or 15 missions, and every single day they transmit a packet of data from Earth to that dish and by laser. Every single day. What are they transmitting to that dish, and why are they transmitting to the dish? Yeah,
that's an interesting thing that Randall told me about too. You know, he was like, if we're to do anything, he's like, we should at least be like if Earth got destroyed tomorrow, there would be virtually nothing left in a couple thousand years. Right, literally building cities. New York City would be dust. Yeah, the only things that would be left are the pyramids, I think, and what is the structure called? Mount Rushmore. Oh yeah, like Mount Rushmore, like these things will still be there. These big giant stone structures, but everything else, like computers, everything else will be dust. And he's like, one of the things that we should be doing is saving or digitizing everything on a hard drive on the moon somehow.
Maybe that's what they're doing, because they're transmitting data like you wouldn't believe. That's probably what they're doing. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it would be a smart thing to do. Yeah. It would be a smart fail-safe.
Right, because you have to get back to the data. That's the only way to understand how to recreate like a cell phone. We know how to use a cell phone, but I don't know how to make a cell phone. And if I learn how to make one part of it, how do I get the other parts to it that need to be done, like the towers and all the technology for a tower and the satellite communication? You have to have a place, a storehouse of information almost like a chamber of knowledge that one can tap into and open up, and all the schematics and all the plans and everything else is right there for you. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and there was an article, I forget how long ago now the article came out, but maybe about 6 months ago, but I think it was a Chinese rover spotted like some sort of black box on the surface of the moon.
Yeah.
And it was going to take them, they were going to go check it out, but the rover was so slow, it supposedly was going to take them months to get there.
Well, that was the second one. The first one, which was years ago, it got stuck in debris. It got tangled in debris. What is debris doing on the moon? They sent one image back, and it had these things that looked like...
Maybe they meant rocks or something.
No, it looked like they sent the images in the image. It looks like bent wires and stuff all over the place, and they couldn't get free of it. And so this is their second one.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. Now, India sent the India University, they have a college there. They raised $3 million, not $3 billion like we do, and they created a satellite, sent it to Mars. And the first image they sent back was of Mars, blue light scatter in the sky, not red. What looks like to be water beneath and mountains and everything else, not dark red like NASA does it. NASA calls those images, by the way, false color. They actually add that red color.
Really?
Yeah, and you can look it up, and they tell you why they do it, because they said it makes image transmission better. So it hides a lot of stuff. It's not red. It looks like you're walking around Arizona when you go there. And that image came back from the Indian Space Agency, and it blew everybody away because it was like, holy crap, it looks like Earth, but it was Mars. Yeah. And
so these images from the Indian Space Agency, they're online right now?
Yeah, they're up there. And so let me see if I have one here.
Austin can probably Google them.
Yeah. Look up the Indian Space Agency Mars image. Now, what's interesting is Bolden, who was the head of NASA at the time, a week later, he flies to India and signs a deal with them, with the Space Agency with NASA. So pretty interesting.
That is fascinating.
Yeah. Why would he do that? As if they probably even moving to maybe even cover it up or take over the data, or who knows what they do. Excuse me. Now, this is an image that I took of Mars from my Celestron 130 home telescope.
Wow.
That's Mars in the summer. Anyone can get a Celestron SLT 130, go out and...
That's incredible.
Go out in February, aim it at Mars. You can find Mars on the app. You can get the space app and show you where Mars is at.
Tells you where to point it.
And you'll get this image.
Okay, so what are we looking at here, Austin? It's some sort of news channel.
Oh, okay, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Craters carved into a golden surface. These are the first images taken by a satellite by India's maiden Mars mission, released by the country's space agency on Thursday. Scientists tweeted, "The view is nice up here," under the Twitter handle @MarsOrbiter, which has amassed more than 108,000 followers since its setup on Tuesday. The satellite, affectionately called MOM by the mission's acronym, will spend 6 months in elliptical orbit, collecting atmospheric data from as close as 365 kilometers and as far out as 80,000 kilometers from the planet's surface.
Have you seen that new Space Force logo they came out with, the triangle?
Yeah.
You see how they put the Sphinx in there? Or it was like a pharaoh's head?
It's crazy. It's Pharaoh's head. Yeah, they got it looking real ancient Egyptian.
What the? I felt like, what are you guys? They're trolling us.
Now, you want to know something else? When we went to Egypt, the entrance or the access to the Grand Gallery, the Grand Gallery inside the Great Pyramid, that's the chamber leading up to the King's Chamber. That's like this little alleyway leads up to the King's Chamber.
Right.
NASA owns the rights to the access to that.
To the King's Chamber.
Yes.
Nobody's ever been in the King's Chamber, right?
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah, many times.
Up into the top part?
The King's Chamber is not at the very top. It's inside this area. So you go up about, I don't know, maybe 40 or 50 meters, and then you enter into the shaft. And from there, you're able to climb up a series of channels until you get to the Grand Gallery. And the Grand Gallery, you have to bend and kind of pull yourself up.
Right.
It leads you into the King's Chamber. You have to duck your head and go underneath this giant slab, this, I don't know, 100-ton slab of freaking granite. You get inside the King's Chamber, which I've been in there many times. It took all the people in there. We were in there meditating.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, it's incredible. But
I heard that
they own that.
I heard there's areas of the pyramid that no one's ever been into. I heard there's like doors or something that you can't go through or no one's ever been through.
There's tons of places. There's an area right above the Grand Gallery that was taken by a muon scan, right exactly where Thoth says he hid the Hall of Records in the pyramid. They found it 3 years ago. This gigantic area above the king's chamber, that's there. It's authenticated now by modern science that what was said in the tablets is real.
Click on that giant diagram and blow that up, Austin. So, okay, go up. Yeah, right there.
The big void. That's
so you've been in that king's chamber.
Oh yeah, many times.
But not inside the void.
No. Nobody's been able to go up there. Not yet. And they're probably cleaning out all the ancient knowledge and wisdom in there, all the records and all the stuff that's in there.
What do you think of the whole Giza power plant theory?
I believe it. So
can you explain the basics of what it is?
So if you do a rewind on the geological clock of Giza, you find out that the Nile ran right up next to the pyramids. Okay, so after the last war, that's why Giza is nothing but sand. Mm-hmm. That's remnants of an ancient war. That's why some of the sand has balls of glass in it. That's 3,000 degrees temperature. That's vitrified sand turned to glass. But anyway, so the Nile used to run right up to the pyramids. Now, underneath the pyramid, we know that's true because we see the dried out aquifer areas where there's these gigantic shafts that run, not man-made, but natural forming areas underneath the pyramid where the water would run. Now, when you take magnetized crystal granite, which is the base, and you use running water underneath it, you create physiostatic electricity. Then the granite will pull the ions up into the pyramid, send them up the Grand Gallery. Now, the Grand Gallery has these slots on each side where the hypothesis by engineers, mainstream engineers too, is that they could have been resonating rods, something to step up the electricity as it went up into the king's chamber. In the king's chamber, here's what's interesting. There's a box in there that they try to say it's a sarcophagus. It's not a sarcophagus. I'm 6'4". I can't fit in that box. Sarcophagus, when you go to the museum, you see what a real sarcophagus is. These things are massive. Not this little tiny box. The box is the exact dimensions, though, of the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant used to sit inside of that box. It was technology. It was a capacitor. And that would then give the extra boost and send the electricity up through the apex where there was a gold capstone. The obelisk, which are magnetized crystal granite, would capture that ambient wireless electricity and then pass it on to what they call JED pillars, D-J-E-D, these JEDs. They had these JEDs. They're depicted in many hieroglyphs, people holding them and connecting them to light bulbs and electroplating devices in hieroglyphs, which I took everybody to go see.
Pause 1 second. What did you say was inside the box?
The Ark of the Covenant.
What is the Ark of the Covenant?
If you look into biblical text, for example, there was this ark that Moses stole. All right, he had this box. He claimed it was given to him by God, but I think he stole it from the Egyptians. This is why they fled after him.
An ark.
Yeah, so it's this box with these cherubims on it, but these cherubims are really a capacitor. It generates a lot of electricity. Inside of this box is something that has so much radiation. That's what it looks like there. That you had to have on specific type of clothing, which is well described even in the Bible. Rubber boots, gloves, this type of suit with this breastplate of metal on it. This is all to prevent the radiation poisoning. When somebody didn't have it on in the Bible and they touched the ark, they would become very sick. Their hair would fall out, their nose would bleed, their eyes would bleed, their fingernails would fall off. Radiation sickness. This thing was generating some type of radiation power, some type of a generator of power of some sort, and it was connected to the Great Pyramid. It was in that box. Evidence for this, for me, that box has a gigantic piece of the granite missing off one corner, like an explosion happened from inside the box. If you look across the Grand Gallery, across the King's Chamber, there's a wall about maybe 30 feet away. The impact from that giant piece of granite that snapped off, it cut that granite on the wall, the exact shape of that corner piece.
Wow. Something
Explosive happened there. For you to throw a piece of granite that heavy, that far, and impact that way. So there was energy in there. Now, if you go back to the story of Moses, it really was Pharaoh Akhenaten. Moses is not the real name. That's the made-up name. Pharaoh Akhenaten, who was ushering in monotheism in Egypt while he was a pharaoh, worshiping Amen-Ra, the great Amen. Amen-Ra was one of these Anunnaki people, said, look, from now on, there'll be no other God but me. That made it into the Bible. When you say thanks, you say thanks to me. You say amen. That made it into the Bible. Teach the people only to worship me, not any of my other relatives. I'm the only one and true God. And he began to do that. Then he made an order to go start defacing all the hieroglyphs and all of these statues around Egypt. That's why the noses and the ears are chipped off. That's why the faces are chipped off everywhere you go. Bodies are chipped away. It wasn't done. The hypothesis on the streets is that it was done because white people back then didn't want black people to know that there were black people in Egypt. That's actually false. The true reality is this was done in ancient times, and it was carried on by Coptic Christians long before Jesus was even born. They were still following that same monotheistic religion, and to them it was offensive to have these faces of all these gods around, because it's only one true and only one God, the great Amen. And that's why all these things were done. But Moses, when he was kicked out, so they said, look, this guy has to go. We got to get him out of here. They kicked him out of Egypt. They kicked the Pharaoh out of Egypt. He went and he took that ark out of the Great Pyramid, and he fled with his new followers. They weren't slaves. They were followers of Akhenaten. They crossed the Sea of Reeds, not the Red Sea, which they tell you in the Bible. Nobody ever crossed the Red Sea. It's a mistranslation by accident on purpose. They crossed a much smaller, much easier to cross sea called the Red Sea, which is also in the same region. And then when the Pharaoh realized the power source of Egypt had been stolen, the new Pharaoh, they sent the chariots after him and everything else. His son was left behind. He didn't want to go. That's Tutankhamun. But Tutankhamun, they started worrying that maybe when he got a little older, he would say, I want revenge for my father. And so they decided to kill him and kill his girlfriend. And that's how the story ended that way. But anyway, that's what happened.
So what was the purpose of this powerful ark? Like what was it used for? Like how are they used? They use these pyramids as giant power structures, and this ark was like the reactor or like something.
A reactor, right.
So what were they doing?
Well, in the desert, when they had it out in the desert, it would give them power. It would give them power to power something called the manna machine. And the manna machine would generate this food for the masses of people that followed him out into the desert. And so it had this capability of generating food. Also, when they were out there, they saw enemies were trying to attack them. I don't know who these enemies were. It never clearly says who they were or why they were attacking, but they would then use this thing as a weapon. It would send a beam out and kill these people. This is technology, and that's in the Bible.
Wow, that's fascinating.
It's not magic. It's not a sky daddy with a magic wand. It's like real hardcore tech that was used, and they recreated this at a university in America, using the exact instructions that are in the Bible.
Really? What university created this?
Google it. I can't remember the name of the university, but professor recreates the ark, or you can look it up. Several people actually have done it as well too since then. It generated so much power he had to shut it down. It was pulling power from everywhere. Yeah, crazy stuff from the exact instructions, and he made one.
The engineer who said the Ark of the Covenant. This is a gizmodo.
A group of college students made a replica of the ark. That's one. There's quite a few now, but there's one that was a while back where
replicas.
Yeah, they made just recreating it from the from the actual instructions. There's tons.
And where were the instructions? The instructions were.
They were in the Bible.
They were in the Bible.
Yeah.
Wow.
There was a few arks. There wasn't just one. One of them was discovered in Ethiopia at an Ethiopian church about 9 years ago. And someone who did a documentary on it claimed it was there. And then right afterward, within a year, it was stolen from the church. They didn't have the military or security or anything like that. And somebody came and just took it. So it's gone. That one's gone. But there's others. But I'm pretty sure if you go on videos, you'll find there's videos of this stuff being turned on and everything else. It's real tech.
That's the problem with this stuff too, is it's so hard to find a lot of it online. Like I know Google curates a lot of the searches, and I don't know how it works or what they push to the top or what they suppress, but a lot of this stuff is very hard to find when you look for it. Have you, I'm sure you have, I'm sure you're familiar with the story of Bob Lazar, how he describes the crafts that he was recruited to back engineer, and he explains how the reactor, explains the reactor inside some of those crafts was like basically when you hold two magnets together, two opposite magnets that repel each other, and there's that invisible force that pushes them away. He explained that's what this reactor was like when you tried to get close to it. It pushes you away like that.
Wow, interesting.
That's what this kind of reminds me of.
I believe Bob Lazar's story, he talked about element 115 20 years ago.
Yeah, his story hasn't changed in
No.
over 20
And now
years.
what happened like 8 years ago, or not, 7 years ago maybe, they discovered element 115 finally, which to me vindicates him. And they've named it now. First they named it unimpentium, then they named it something else, moscovium or something like that. But it's on the periodic table of elements now.
Yeah.
And he talked about this element, and they said, no, this impossible doesn't exist. Now all of a sudden it's on the chart.
Yeah.
So to me, now I have to listen to the guy, because something he talked about 20 years ago is real.
Do you think it's true? Do you think that our government has the possession of some sort of technology that they're not sharing with the rest of science and academia? They're not sharing with the public?
Oh, absolutely. The incident that happened at Roswell, it wasn't just that one craft. Multiple craft came down that day. We were using something called a scalar weapon. We were aware of these craft. We used a scalar weapon. We realized early on that different frequencies were affecting the navigation of these craft. And we used that weapon. It wasn't really a weapon. We used it as a weapon to bring them down. And then we recovered those crashed UFOs.
See, that sort of troubles me. I can't imagine if there was this other civilization that had vehicles that are able to do the things they do, like the way these pilots describe them. How would we be able to take them down? Doesn't compute to me.
Well, space travel is very dangerous. So, going to Mars, which is right around the corner, is a deadly mission. Like, anybody who gets up enough gall to go there, they understand that they might not even leave our atmosphere. And even in 100 years from now, traveling to Mars is still dangerous. And imagine you're a civilization that's taking your first trip to the to the Earth solar system area, and you come out here and you got your ship, and that ship could be 30 or 40 years old in your time frame, wherever the case may be. It's already an old bugger. You made it out here, and now all of a sudden there's this something you didn't anticipate. You didn't anticipate this particular type of a frequency beam being pointed at your ship, disturbing your navigation. Just like we went all the way to with the Philae lander to that gigantic Comet 67P, and we thought we had the landing programming all set, and all of a sudden we crashed into it because the gravity wasn't what we thought it was going to be. After spending billions of dollars, we crashed the lander. We couldn't land properly. So I think that space travel is really dangerous. So we finally break out of this solar system. We want to go to another solar system, and we want to go there. There's going to be unforeseen things that can happen that we may never make it back. You're really going to be a real explorer when you go out there like that. Space is dangerous.
Do you think that what do you think's more probable, that they traveled through space to get here, or they traveled some other way, like they are either through another dimension, or that they're here already, maybe living under the ocean or living somewhere that we
have all three? Everything you just said is accurate to me. I think we have under the ocean, that there's people living here that have been here for a very long time. I believe that they have their own breakaway civilization. The oceans are pretty much mostly undisturbed, and they're there. I think you also have multidimensionals, beings that are in higher dimensions or other dimensions that know how to match their subatomic frequency to our particular dimension, and they can walk right in or fly right in or come right in some type of way. And then also I believe that you have beings that are light years away that can travel here. And I don't think that they're using typical space travel. They're probably using something like a warp drive, where in a warp drive, what really happens is you actually shrink space in front of the ship and you expand it from the back. So in essence, you're sitting on a tablecloth, and then somebody's pulling the tablecloth. And so you're riding the tablecloth. You never really go anywhere. A warp drive, you never really move. And we've tested the warp drive now. We've actually got a functioning and working warp drive in the laboratory.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So the technology is real. We've created a real warp bubble.
Is this similar to what they explain when, like, traveling through black holes? You take a piece of paper and you just fold it in half, and you're traveling from here to here?
That's different. That's portal travel. Okay. So that's hyperspace, where you actually use something called an Einstein-Rosen bridge, is the technical term used, because Einstein and Rosen, theoretical physicists, came up with the idea that we can go through bent or warped space, and you can get there quicker. And so, which is great. And I believe that happens too. But again, the exotic energy you would need is pretty extreme. You really have to be in a super advanced civilization to be able to do that. But traveling multiples of the speed of light without breaking the theory of relativity is possible with a warp drive.
without breaking the theory of relativity.
Yeah.
Right?
In other words,
Like
saying
general
relativity, saying that, you know, we're going faster than the speed of light. Well, how can you do that? Well, you can do that because you never moved. Only space moved. So by that method, you're not breaking the law.
Now, some of these anti-gravity examples of technology that Bob Lazar talks about, this stuff would sort of bypass general relativity.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But the thing is, like, for example, some of those crafts that are moving like 6,000 miles an hour and making 90-degree turns, you have to realize that they're in a bubble. So the anti-gravity, it creates this bubble around the vessel.
Right.
And anything inside is not affected by those movements, because what appears to us to be erratic movements inside the bubble, it's like if you're driving in a car that's moving 80 miles an hour and there's a fly in the car with you. We know flies can't fly, you know, a house fly, they can't fly 80 miles an hour. Why is a fly in the car flying around while you're moving at 80 miles an hour? Because the fly has already picked up the speed of the moving car.
Right.
And now the fly itself is moving at 80 miles an hour as well. And so, you know, it's kind of that scenario.
Yeah. The way he explains it, which is, I think, makes a lot of sense, is essentially whenever those things are moving, the way they're described is like they're falling. They're falling in that direction, and they're just bending gravity around them.
Yeah. NASA just found X points around Earth. They've called them X points. These are naturally occurring portals. They say they're natural, that open and close every day. X points, look it up.
I just heard something, I forget who, I think it was Jeremy Corbell posted on Twitter that there was a guy around in Arizona, I think it was, somewhere near Site S4. He was doing something, studying rocks. This guy's like was not into aliens or any of that stuff over at like S4 or Area 51. He was camping there for a while. He knew he was in a restricted area, but he really wanted to take some photos of some rocks. I don't know exactly what he was doing. I'm probably fucking this up, but he basically explains he saw a fucking door come up out of Papoose Lake.
Wow.
Like just appear like a floating doorway in space.
Man.
Come up out of Papoose Lake. Is that similar to what you're describing, these X points?
Well, the X points, they're upper atmosphere.
Okay.
Like, so they're like upper atmosphere just outside the but not too far out where they're on the Lagrange point. They're like right at the top surface, right outside the atmosphere of Earth. And they're these diffusion points, they call them, that at certain times of the day, portals actually open up. And they even have direct paths to the sun, to the moon, even to other planets and other parts of space, which is pretty crazy. And they're saying that they're artificial. See, hidden portals in Earth's magnetic field. And so now scientists are working on how can they create a stable X point and control when it opens and closes, and where can it take them to, things like that.
Wow. Mingling lines of magnetic force from the sun and the earth crisscross and join to create opening X points, and where the crisscross takes place the X points are where the crisscross takes place. The sudden joining of magnetic fields can propel jets of charged particles from the X points, creating an electron diffusion region.
Yeah.
Whoa. That's pretty nuts.
Yeah.
So many crazy things, man. So many fucking
There's
wild.
a lot going on out here.
There's a lot going on. It's hard to keep up with all of it.
I know.
How do you keep up with all this new stuff happening all the time? And a lot of it you can't, like, if you're just the average Joe who's not really, you're just doing your 9 to 5, living your life, taking care of your kids.
Yeah.
It's so hard to manage and keep track of all this stuff that's happening, especially when it's not in like the mainstream surface level of the media.
It's an absolute lifestyle, you know, it's a lifestyle. And fortunately for me, from the way my brain was trained, once I read something, I can retain a lot of it for a long period of time. It's hard to forget a lot, you know, like I haven't the X points that came out in 2012 or something like that. And I'm still remembering all the information about the X points, you know, so my retention has been fairly decent, which helps me a lot.
How did you come to learn about or have such a complex understanding of different dimensions and how they work? Like the fourth dimension, and I think you said there's up to 11 dimensions, or scientists have discovered that somehow.
Yeah. I started studying quantum physics. That was after that incident. That was the other thing that happened after that incident, that encounter, if you want to call it. I started having a heavy thirst for quantum physics, and I started delving deep into it. I even created a quantum physics group on Facebook. And then I started studying with Khan University, which is a free university that a lot of people don't know exists online, and they have a quantum physics course. I started studying that too, and I was able to understand a lot of this stuff. And so I dug real deep into it, and I got to the understanding that we're living in a multi-dimensional universe, and there's at least 11 dimensions. Otherwise, the universe would collapse. Each dimension is a 90-degree angle right above the next one, compactified. So they're sitting right on top of us. So within less than a Planck unit of space above you, there's another dimension that actually exists with a whole nother universe happening simultaneously while we're sitting right here. Wild.
That's hard to fathom. It's hard to fathom. So right here where we're sitting right now, there's a whole nother dimension of a whole nother universe happening, life taking place.
Yes.
Right in the same space that we are.
Right here. Right here where we are. Right here. Vast too. Vast. Just as vast as ours is vast. And from higher dimensions, they experience time differently. Time really doesn't exist. The past, present, and the future happen all at once. So somebody, for example, from the fifth dimension would look at us and they'd be able to see us. Imagine us in this building here, but imagine when I first walked in, and imagine us in here, and imagine me like in the bathroom or something. They'd be able to see us in all the different rooms. The different rooms will represent different time frames of existence within this structure. So they can see the past, present, and future at the same time. So it's pretty cool. Weird stuff starts happening the higher the dimensions you go.
So is the idea that when you're in a higher dimension, you can see below lower dimensions, but you can't see dimensions above you?
Exactly, unless you have the capability of matching. First, you have to obtain the frequency of a higher dimension and then match that frequency to be able to walk in. So
match the frequency.
Yeah. So for example, okay, my hand is stopped now by this table, right? Why is it stopped? I'm not really touching the table. There's repulsion going on. Electromagnetic repulsion between the electrons in my hand is repelling the electrons in the table. You don't really touch anything. Now, if I can match the subatomic frequency of the atoms in this chunk of wood here on this table, I could, with my hand, I would be able to pass my hand right through this table unscathed. Why? Because atoms are 99.999% empty space. Nothing is really here. Everything is only a light wave slowed down to a particular frequency. And so if you can match frequencies, you can merge with things. You can walk through walls and all that kind of stuff. The things that seem paranormal could be advanced beings have tapped into some type of understanding of how to match different frequencies in our dimension and appear apparitional or paranormal. But in true reality, they could just be taking a peek in.
And how did we come to the understanding that these higher dimensions exist? Like, what is the most basic evidence that we have of this?
Quantum physics proves it. See, when we look into the quantum world, everything changed. In standard physics is where we are right now, in the large side of physics. But the smaller you go, the more weird things get. We find that particles transphase in and out of existence, and they go to different dimensions. We even know now that some of our synapses of our thoughts in our brain phase out of this dimension and they go somewhere else, and then they come back again. And this has all been tracked and traced through the understanding of quantum mechanics and quantum physics, and understanding that dimensions exist. The biggest way that we made a model of this is we figured out how to create something called quasi-crystals. Now, these quasi-crystals are these multi-dimensional crystals. We actually created an 8th dimensional quasi-crystal.
We created this.
Yes, we created it.
How did we create it?
We created in a laboratory using different technologies. And then from that 8th dimensional quasi-crystal, it casts a shadow of itself down to a 4th dimensional quasi-crystal, which then casts down a shadow which creates a sphere. So we know that the universe is most likely the shadow of a higher dimension. It's crazy stuff.
Yeah, that's kind of mind-bending.
We're living in a light matrix, which is actually a light matrix, which is a shadow of a much higher dimension. And so we know this because they created these crystals, these quasi-crystals, and when they put them at different angles, they cast shadows. Sometimes
what do these crystals look like?
You look up the quasi-crystals, yeah. They look like, have you ever seen Adinkra codes? Adinkras?
I think I've heard you talk about this before. No,
they look like Adinkra, the symbols, mathematical symbols, but in the 3rd dimensional time space. And so if you take them and pull them out into a third-dimensional time space, they look like these lines that are connected with these nodes like that. You see? Quasi crystals.
This is a quasi crystal.
Yeah.
And so
it's an ordered structure, but it's not periodic. And it's got a crystalline
formed
pattern.
atomically.
Yeah.
In a manner somewhere between the amorpha solids of glasses, special forms of metals and other minerals, as well as common glass, and the precise pattern of crystals.
Yeah. So if you type in if you put 8th dimensional quasi crystal, you should see some research that
it
come
looks
up on that.
like what you look into a kaleidoscope.
It's a fractal. It's all about fractal. We live in a fractal holographic universe. The quasi crystal is a fundamental basis of the fractal holography that we're living in. We're fully immersed in it, so we can't detect it, but we're living in a light matrix. And that's what the Adinkra codes also prove.
Okay, explain the Adinkra codes. What is that exactly?
So Professor James Gates Jr., University of Maryland, former scientific advisor to President Obama, just to give you like this guy, he's not just like a jackpot or something. He's like a real dude, you know?
Yeah.
And he put together a team of the most incredible supersymmetry and theoretical physicists in the world, like the top brains in the world on this. And they started analyzing what is the ether of space-time. What is this soup that we're living in, that we're inhabiting, this universe? What is it? What is it made of? What's powering it? They discovered something called Adinkra codes, which go back to the ancient Dogon tribe from Mali, Africa. The original inhabitants of the land of Cam then moved to Mali later after they were thrown out, taken over at one point. But they still kept this ancient knowledge in Mali about these Adinkra codes, and they would draw these patterns. Well, he discovered that these patterns are actually mathematical codes. And these are not just any mathematical code. There goes one there. They're actually the codes that describe the ether of space-time itself. They're error-correcting codes, the same exact codes that run our search engines and web browsers that we're using right now to look at the image. There's coding behind that screen that runs this, what we just did. And guess what? It's the same code that runs the universe. So we discovered that we're living in a programmed light matrix. There's a software programmer that has written this code.
Austin, pull up more images of this.
There's all different types of images. There you go. See, now that you see that one there, right there. That's a quasi. That looks like a lot like a quasi crystal. If you were to shrink it down and put a whole bunch of them in one location, it looks very similar to a quasi crystal. So these are Adinkra codes, and you can see the colorful one that was up there. These are depicting the nature of reality.
Wow.
And they actually are mathematical programming codes. They're a special type of code, though. They're error correcting codes. The same type that Google browser is running on is the same thing that runs the universe.
Error correcting codes.
Yeah.
And what do we gain from all of this knowledge? Like, what does this tell us, and where do we take this? Like, what is obviously this is like foundational knowledge for us, but like, where do you see it going?
Well, if you understand that we're living in a fractal holographic light matrix, it doesn't mean we're not real. It just means that there is a creator or creators, that we're living in something that was created, just like the ancient texts and all the scribes and biblical texts and everything else says. But it tells us, wow, this is the method of the creation. Now we're getting closer to understanding what we really are. We understand now that consciousness isn't made inside this avatar body, that the avatar body doesn't even exist, that consciousness is a stream of something, coming from somewhere else, and is being picked up in this matrix with this coding. If you took all the humans on Earth, there's 8 billion humans on Earth. If I took all 8 billion humans and removed the empty space between their atoms, I can fit every human into a sugar cube. One sugar cube can hold all 8 billion of us.
Really?
Yeah.
All the atoms of 8 billion people on Earth.
You can see atoms are empty space. If you take the empty space out, you collapse it into one sugar cube. All 8 billion can fit in one sugar cube. So what does that mean?
Wild.
What's here? There's only one consciousness, it seems. And it's like a radio station that's transmitting out a frequency from a higher dimension. Our avatar bodies pick up that frequency. You're 99.1, I'm 99.2, he's 99.3, but it's still coming from the same source. And so we're all coming from the same source. It's like the universe has found a way to live subjectively through multiple entities, but not even through entities, even through objects that we consider to be man-made. because every atom we know now in quantum physics is also conscious.
Does this give any credence to the simulation theory?
Absolutely. We're living in a simulation. This is an actual simulation. What we've done now with the video game No Man's Sky, it's got 80 quadrillion worlds in there. It's a never-ending game created by, I think, 12 college students, fits on one DVD, and they're going to add AI into it, which means that the beings and the animals and everything else in there, they're going to become conscious. Also, the other video game that they have where you have the people walking around and everything else, I forgot the name of the game now. But
The Sims.
The Sims.
Yeah.
The Sims, they're talking about adding consciousness to the Sims and adding AI in there. So eventually these Sims are going to start asking questions. Who are we? Where do we come from? What is this that we're living in, this construct? Is there a Big Bang? Yeah, the Big Bang is when we hit the power button and turned you on. That's the Big Bang. That's when everything went out.
Yeah.
So, they can then maybe even begin to write programs in the Sims program to create their own universe. So there's multiple layers of reality. I don't think we're even close to base reality.
Isn't it so crazy that it was only 30 years ago that we only had that Pong game with the balls and the two sticks?
Oh my God.
And now look at what we have in 30 years.
Crazy. I got the original Atari 2600. My uncle bought it for me. He came down from New York. He was a police officer in New York. The only most expensive gift I ever got, which is why I still have it today in a closet in a box. He bought that thing and I played that thing, the Pong and Pac-Man.
Yeah.
And I played it for a couple of weeks and I got the little callus in my hand and I was like, okay, I'm tired. But but it was cool,
Yeah.
Connect to a VHF TV. And then look where we are now. My son turned a video game on. This was a couple of years ago. I was at his apartment and I thought it was an actual NFL game. I didn't know it was a video game.
Yes, I play video games all the time, and I play Madden and NBA, and these games literally look like, if you haven't seen those games before, they look just like the real game on TV. It's indistinguishable.
Wild.
And then now with VR, like the Oculus and the stuff that Facebook's doing, it's pretty wild, and augmented reality.
Yeah.
If you, like Elon says, if you assume any rate of advancement compounding over time, just in 100 years, there's going to be, in less than 100 years, the video games are going to be completely 100% indistinguishable from reality.
Yes, that's true. And so the human mind is so easily fooled. It just takes program input. So the human mind is encased in darkness. It doesn't even know what's going on out here, but it has friends, sight, hearing, smell, touch, feel, all those 5 senses. It sends the friends out. The friends collect data. Now my friends, my brain's friends, touch, doesn't know what this is, doesn't know what's going on here. But it combines with the data from the eye. The eye sees it, doesn't know what it is. But the eye and the hands send a signal back to the brain, send data packets back to the brain. The brain then sorts it out and then creates a hologram of what's here. And then I'm navigating through the third dimension based on a hologram from data packets.
Right.
And the universe is doing the same thing. There's one consciousness, which has divided itself into Googles of entities. Me and you are one of them. And it's experiencing itself. We are the sensory perception for the universe.
We only have eyeballs, nose, mouth, skin. We can only, our constructed physical bodies can only observe so many dimensions.
Right.
Well, wonder what it would take for us to be able to observe a different dimension.
Well,
are we thinking about it the right way? Would it be a physical alteration to our body, or what?
Well, it would be scary because we can't even see. We only see 1% of the light spectrum here. If we saw more than 1% of the light spectrum, we'd freak out. There's so much going on, in the multi-spectrum, in the ultraviolet, in the infrared, in the gamma ray range, in the X-ray range. We would freak out. There's stuff going on all around us as we speak. Billions of waves and frequencies moving around us that we would be able to see if we had the eyes for it. And I think that 1% is all we can handle. Let's be honest with you. Yeah, more than 1%, it would be a lot. Yeah, it'd be cool to have some X-ray vision or something like that.
Yeah.
But you add it all together at once, and now you're talking about multiple dimensions. Well, the human avatar body can't even get to the dimension because we're a third-dimensional substructure. We'd have to create the technology to phase shift into a body of some type, whatever type that would possibly be, to even ascend to a higher dimension.
Yeah. Well, I mean, going back to the simulation theory, it seemed like if we were in a simulation, of course, only like people like Elon Musk would believe that,
Right.
because if you were playing a character in a simulation, you would want to play somebody like Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Right. You wouldn't want to play, Joe Blow working at the hardware store.
Right.
You people like with fascinating, interesting lives, doing crazy things with unlimited money that could do anything they wanted.
Yeah.
That would be the most enticing player to be in a simulation.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty, but what I think is happening here is the reason why it's not specifically like a game that you control it in a certain level. But what's cool, I think, is that the universe itself is using us to figure out what it's like to be Billy Carson, what it's like to be you, what it's like to be this microphone, what it's like to be a person that's living impoverished, what's it like to be a person that's living rich, what it's like to be an adventurer, an explorer, what is it like to be all these different things, what is it like to be a blade of grass, what is it like to be a rock? And I think all that data is being transmitted back to source in real time.
And what do you think the source is? Do you think the source is like, are we a simulation inside of a simulation inside of a simulation, or are there actual biological beings that are controlling the simulation?
That's a great question. I can only go by Hermetic principles, as above, so below. And so if you look at the way the universe or the multiverse would be set up, it's almost like cells in a human body, because you look at the cells in our body, it's like a multiverse inside of us. Mm-hmm. And so it's like we're living in also a multiverse, which is full of cells. Each universe could be a cell. It's just really amazing. So it could be biological. It could be that we're in a biological body. It could be that we're in a software program. I mean, there's so many possibilities. It's almost endless. But I do know that the fundamental basis of what we're living in is light. Because everything, if you take an atom out of this phone and then smash it, it's going to give off light. It's just slowed down light waves to a slower frequency. Everything that exists, I mean, everything in the third dimension, everything you could think of is only a light wave. Matter of fact, due to wave particle duality, everything only exists as a wave first and then collapses into what we appear to be the illusion of solid matter later. Like right now, you're here. Your home exists as a wave of potentials. It doesn't even exist as a solid structure. Now, if somebody sees it, it collapses instantaneously into a solid structure known as your house. Mm-hmm. Your house has a specific frequency because of the way the atoms were stacked. So it always collapses into the same structure. When you get around that corner and you finally make it home and you see it, that's when it collapses back into your house again. Everything you can't see exists as waves, just like in a video game. The next frame only appears when you need it to. If you go this way, the screen doesn't go anywhere. It's the same screen. The next light matrix moves into your view so you can play the video game. You go back this way, again, it just keeps moving. We're living in that type of a simulation.
Where do you think human existence is as far as where do you think technology ends up in the next 100 to 200 years? Like, what do you think? Do you have an optimistic view of this, or do you have sort of a dystopian view of this, or where do you think we go? What do you think happens with artificial intelligence and machines and the human species?
I'm pretty optimistic, actually, just based on what I know from research and cycles. It looks like we're in the Tetra Yuga, according to the Yuga cycles. We're on the beginning of a silver age, heading back toward a golden age. We got a few thousand years to go to get there, but it's going to.
What's up? She's just so disappointed to meet you. Whoops! I just burnt the, oh no. Brilliant, well done, done it. Good start.
But every time he goes to show me something, it's better. You know.
Oh no!
What are you doing, Danny?
Iron it.
But when I got oil. Oh, at least you're doing it inside out.
See?
You have learned something. And Harry, I think the poster for the film actually should be you on the bridge with the moon on the floor, otherwise you give away the ending.
It's too hot. What do I do? Mine's artistic.
Danny, arguing about autographs.
D, you don't have it. Your surname doesn't begin with D.
I've changed it. I put love on it now.
Oh, and he puts dots on it to make it look like boobs.
Looks like nipples. And then he tells little girls that he puts nipples on it.
What?
Yeah, nipples.
No, Dad, I say you'll know what they are when you're older.
boys. Hello.
Hello, Santa.
Santa, you got pies.
Wow.
Indeed.
That's not bad.
Now this is a traditional Christmas game of find the chili in the pie. Spin it round. You all have to take a pie, and one of you is in for a real treat.
Oh my
The
god.
devil's chili. Fare thee well, boys.
Right, so
Okay.
Santa's put one of these has a devil's chili in it.
No, look.
Should we just take the one that's in front of us?
You have to half the
And
pie.
one of the rules, you can't spit it out.
Can't spit it out. You have to do half the pie, chew, and swallow it. Yeah, right. Is this the thing? You have to eat the whole pie.
Yeah.
So whether you do it in chunks, you have to do it, and you can't. If you've got the chili, you can't take it out.
I feel sick. Oh, see on the other
Okay,
side.
ready? 1, 2, 3, go.
I've got it.
Really?
Do it. Oh, you
Do it. Got to run a bit.
Do it. Go on, Daddy.
Have you got it?
Go on, Daddy.
You got to run a bit.
Go on, Daddy. Chew.
Go on.
I'll pick that up.
Finger up.
Chew. No, I haven't. Oh no. Oh yeah, I have. There's so much spice in here anyway. Why do I have to get it? It's oh. Shouldn't I? You have to eat it. Oh look, I've eaten half of it.
Well, we eat all the pie.
10 cheese. Oh no! He hasn't even gone near it!
That's just the infusion into the rest of the pie. You gotta eat the pie. I'd get it done in the next mouthful.
Why do I have? Why do I?
This is the challenge.
You ain't even done one. Daddy. Can I just eat one bit with the chili on? Eat it.
Put the whole thing in your mouth and
The
eat
rest
it.
of it will cool it down.
Have you got any yogurt? 10 cheese.
Yes, the whole thing. Put the whole thing in.
Good boy. Go on, swallow. 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 Swallow.
Open your mouth.
Swallow.
Swallow.
Longer you keep it in your mouth, longer it burns. That was a nice mince pie, that actually.
It's really good, I enjoyed that.
Quite tasty.